last one was news to him. He knew that Sir Anders' sister had had multiple free children who had either been sent to the wall or the septs of Old Town, but he hadn't known she had remarried. A marriage to a household knight was inconsequential, except for perhaps strengthening House Royce's hold over their vassals. Good for her that she had found happiness again after the mess that had been the fall of House Free. Lastly, Sir Anders enjoys very good relations with his vassals of House Coldwater, as Lord Coldwater is his maternal cousin. His own wife is my sister, which ensures my loyalty and that of my lordly brother. He laughed. He had forgotten that the man in front of him was Sir Anders' brother-in-law. "Young Allard is your nephew?" he asked. Tolit nodded. "Yes, he is. Good lad, he is a lot like Ander and idolizes his father. He's good with a sword for his age and he has potential for rule. The Crown Prince, Redfort and Waynwood heirs are good friends of him, as well as my brother's youngest son. Additionally, it may be mentioned that House Royce has held significant sway over House Upcliffe ever since the war. Thank you for this detailed description, Sir Jeremy. It helps me to assess the benefits of a marriage with House Royce. I must admit that they have done a very good job to integrate themselves with the nobility of the Vale. It is an impressive feat what they have accomplished through marriage. The same can be said for you for family, King Stark." The knight quipped, which made him smile. I have done my best. Now, what would a possible betrothal look like?" he asked. "My liege's proposal is that the marriage would wait a few more years until your daughter is 15, regardless of when she flowers. The marriage would be held in the September in Runestone for the peerage of the Vale and all those of your kingdom that you wish there to be present. Allard would make the journey to Winterfell himself in 2 years, after he comes of age. This way he gets to know his fiancée and for you to get to know your future son-in-law before the marriage. Ander wouldn't oppose to it, as he wants his heir to see some of the world to try to understand it more. House Stark is the Vale's principal ally. It is important that he visits Winterfell. Knowing my liege, he would likely encourage the boy to travel onto the wall as well. Anders' brother Waymar died as a member of the Night's Watch and the Royces have always respected the Watch. He would want to instill the same values on his son." Told him. "Very well, I would have to discuss this with my wife and council before making a decision, but that seems very reasonable. What would Sir Ander want as a dowry, if I were to agree to this?" he asked. Sir Jeremy looked him in the eye. "Sir Ander would be happy with a gift consisting either of raw materials or coin. I have been allowed to negotiate on both. However, my liege would prefer for a specific trade clause to be included to some of your ports. He is especially interested in trade with Maidenpool, Solpants, Duskendale and White Harbour." Of course he was. "Do I need to understand from that that the rivalry with House Grafton is still ongoing?" "Not at all. House Grafton cannot stand up to my liege anymore. Their loss of lands to House Royce, combined with the devastation they suffered, have put them far enough back that they aren't a daily concern for my lords anymore." I understand that, but, surely, they have largely recovered from that in the last 15 years. After all, your side had suffered devastation as well." He countered, knowing full well that the Tolit Knight hadn't told him the full story. "We have long since replenished, King Rob. It is true that they have largely recovered as well, although they remain shackled to new taxes for the next 30 years. The slight hurdle we have met is that the fame of Gulltown sometimes outweighs the usefulness of our ports for foreign traders. We would like to remedy this, especially when it comes to your kingdom," he explained. It was clear. House Royce and their trade was booming well, but they were often overlooked by outside merchants. His kingdom was the main trading partner of the Vale, especially the 4 towns that had been named. Diverting trade away from them to their own ports and skipping over Gulltown could both be a major boon to House Royce and a major blow to House Grafton. "That is an interesting proposal. I will take it with me to my council meeting this afternoon. Although, I can tell you that I can never agree to preferential treatment of all 4 of those cities. Nevertheless, some of them might be discussable." He diplomatically answered the request. "That is all my liege asks of you," Sir Jeremy acknowledged. "Would it seem agreeable to you that I discuss this with my council and family, before meeting you again? Let's say we talk again 2 days from now, would that work?" "Certainly, King Rob. I thank you for your time and hospitality." The knight stood up and bowed slightly out of respect, before leaving the room. He basked in the sunlight coming from the window for a few minutes, before getting up and walking out the door himself to find Alice. After lunch and a very long talk with his wife, it was time for his council meeting. When he walked into the new council chamber, everybody was already there. He looked proudly over one of the first rooms in the old keep that had been restored. Natural light flowed in from the windows towards the south and west. On the north wall, a great old tapestry hung that had been in his family for centuries before he was born. It depicted the defeat of the Wildling brothers Gendel and Gorn by his ancestor. They had crowned themselves king and led a host of wildlings south of the wall 3,000 years ago. The tapestry depicted the ensuing battle after his ancestors showed up. It depicted the killing of Gorn by the Stark Crown Prince, after the Wildling had killed his father and king. He had hung it there for a reason. It was a testament to how old his family was, but there was more. It showed all councillors that would ever set foot in this room that his family would in the end prevail. If he were to fall or be defeated, another Stark would rise and finish the job. He had also chosen the Wildlings as a common enemy and had refrained from hanging any tapestries in the room that could agitate Southerners or Seven Believers. On the east wall, above the fireplace, hung a tapestry depicting the mythical Brandon the Builder to show his dedication to great works and infrastructure, as well as show his family's mythical founding. In the middle of the room stood a dark oaken table. It was rectangular in size, with one seat at both ends. One was large and decorated with direwolves cut into the wood in the design of the throne of Winterfell. The one on the other side was very similar, but smaller and less grand. In the smaller seat sat his 15-year-old son Ricard with his back towards the door. He turned around and smiled at him as he entered. He smiled back and swiftly pinched his shoulder as he passed, but he said nothing to his son. This was not the time and he had to learn that. He sat down in his seat, as all his councillors stood up silently. "Please be seated, my lords." He began the meeting. His councillors all took a seat. To his right, in a slightly more decorated seat than the others, sat Jon. He had made the seat of the Hand of the King stand out more than the others, whilst still being dwarfed by both the king's and the heir's seat. It was a show of symbolism that clearly showed the hierarchy in the room. To his left sat his old great-uncle and captain of his Wolfsguard. His uncle had become too old for many of the mundane tasks now at 74 years of age, but he still served capably as one of his advisors. Tor had taken over most of his active duties and firmly served as the second in command of the guard. The others at the table were free to sit wherever they wished. Next to Jon sat Os, his childhood friend and his wife's cousin, as Master of the Treasury. Next to him, you had his Master of Laws Lord Jason Mallister. Almost as old as his great-uncle, but still sharp as a blade. Then you had Sir Wylis Mondaly, who had taken over the position of Master of Ships from his father half a decade ago. On the far right of the table, his advisors Lord Danwell Deddings, Lord Lothar Mallory and Lord Cleesewin made up the rest of the row. Next to his great-uncle sat Lord Roderick Dustin. Lady Dustin had died from a fever this winter and Lord Roderick had succeeded her as ruler of the Barrowlands. Roderick himself mostly remained in Winterfell or on the road, whilst his heir William ruled over Barrowton. William had been groomed and educated by Lady Barbary for years, and as such the inheritance had gone over smoothly. Next to Lord Roderick sat his Master of Whisperers. A peculiar man named Berthon, who had been brought to him from White Harbour by Lord Wyman Mondaly a dozen years ago. The man had originally been born in the merchant class there but had soon realized that he could make more coin gathering information about the world and selling it to merchants who were willing to pay for anything that could get them ahead of their competition. With the guidance of Lord Wyman and the funds of the Royal Treasury, he had managed to establish a spy network that stretched over West Eos and even some of the free cities. Although not as thorough as the Spider's network had once been, it had provided him with valuable insight on many a topic throughout the years. Next to him sat Maester Jon Os, who had succeeded Maester Lewin 3 years ago after his childhood teacher had succumbed during the winter. He had firmly told the Citadel that he would only accept a Maester native to his kingdom and they had sent him Jon Os, born as the third son of a landed knight sworn to House Vance of Atranta. The man was capable and seemed trustworthy, although he still had his messages watched from time to time. His council was completed with 3 more advisors that he had appointed. Lords Harleys Hornwood, Lord Rupert Brune and Sir Henry Bracken, the heir to Stonehenge, completed the council. Whilst most of active councillors had remained the same throughout the last 15 years, the advisors changed a lot. Advisors had often quit or were replaced throughout the years depending on familiar circumstances in their lives. His brother-in-law Harry had long served as an advisor in summer, but he had given up his position to personally manage his lands throughout the winter. Domeric Bolton had done a similar thing, whilst Lord Lucas Goodwood had resigned due to the inability to pacify and rebuild his lands when visiting Winterfell so often. Other members of the council had died like Lady Dustin, Lord Roderick Roswell and Lord Roger. It had also been difficult the last years to find men from the Riverlands to serve him. Many important and skilled nobles had died, and their lands had been devastated. Their young heirs more than often couldn't leave their homelands for long trips at a time as they needed to manage the reconstruction closely. Other times, the heirs had been too young to even rule the lands themselves the first years, or the lands belonged to newly awarded lords and landed knights which needed to win over their subjects first. However, now the Riverlands were well represented. One man he had often thought of bringing to his council had been Hoster Blackwood, the bookish but very well-read younger brother of Lords Blackwood and Goodwood. Nevertheless, he couldn't do so. The Brackens wouldn't accept another boon given to the Blackwoods, and he couldn't risk opening wounds that finally seemed to be mending. Instead, he had named Sir Henry Bracken, and the man seemed capable enough for now. The last and most recent member of his council was his boy, Rickard. He was of the opinion that the heir to the kingdom should always have a seat at the council to know how things were ran. He also believed in involving his son quickly in governance. His father and Lord Rickard had thought him well, yet when he was only Rookie's age he had had to call the banners to march south against the Lannisters. He had felt horribly unprepared at that time. He hoped his sons or grandsons would never have to do something like that, but better to be unnecessarily prepared than caught with your breeches hanging. He had an agreement with his son. The boy was still underage, and so he had forbidden him to talk in any of the council meetings, no matter how good his ideas were. He had a quill and ink in front of him on which he could write all the questions he had and everything that he didn't understand. After every council meeting, he sat down with his son for half an hour and answered all his questions. He also listened to his suggestions, which had proven very useful on more than one occasion. The point was for the boy to learn to appreciate counsel and to listen to his vassals and advisors. He needed to be taught to think about their advice before immediately commenting on it. He had done so for the last 8 months, and it had worked out well. His son had also enjoyed their time after the council meetings when it was just the two of us. As you know, I have welcomed an ambassador of House Royce in my halls the past 2 days. He has updated me on the workings of the Vale. In short, it seems that King Harold's authority is still growing strong, as is the power of the families that had made up the Lords Declarant 20 years ago. Even with Lady Anya Wainwood and Lord Horton Redfort dying, their families retain their hold over the court. King Harold's heir Prince Jasper Arryn has wed Lord Jalwood Hunter's eldest daughter last year, as promised after the war. Whilst King Harold's eldest daughter has recently been betrothed to the heir of House Belmore. Bronze Yohn Royce has been replaced as his Hand of the King by Lord Simon Templeton due to sickness, but his heir Sir Albar remains on the Arryn's council. He told his councillors, "If I may add something, Your Grace." Berthon asked, and he nodded. Lord Royce's health seems to be failing more than they let on. Whispers from the Eyrie tell me that they don't expect him to ever make a full recovery. His spymaster added. Sir Jeremy Tollett told me a similar thing this morning. It's a pity. Yohn Royce was a very good man, both to us and the Vale. This elicited responses from Lord Mallister and his great-uncle. Both were saddened by the news about their old war companion. Lord Jason had known him well, as they often confronted each other at tourneys, whilst his uncle had bonded with him during his time as Knight of the Gate. After a while, the talk died down. I suggest that we use this opportunity to discuss how the other kingdoms are faring. Berthon, would you do me the honor? Certainly, Your Grace. He ruffled through a few of his papers before speaking. The Westerlands seem to finally be thriving again. Finally rid of the need to pay war reparations, the Lannisters themselves are once again investing more. King Willem has expanded his fleet with 6 warships, and new trading ships have also been added. The defences of Lannisport and all coastal castles have been restored and often even fortified, as it seems that the Lannisters don't trust the Ironborn's new peaceful ways just yet. The man from White Harbor took a deep breath before continuing. Nevertheless, King Willem's hold on some of his vassals remains tenuous. Many proud houses still look down upon his so-called merchant queen it seems, and they still enjoy the autonomy they have created for themselves after the fall of Tywin Lannister. King Willem seems to be making headway here through clever politicking, although it goes slowly. As you know, his twin brother's marriage to a daughter of House Serrit pacified one of his strongest possible opponents in the East early on in his reign. The marriage of his much younger sister Janie to the heir of House Banefort, as well as his own to Lady Westerling, have solidified royal control over the northern coastal regions of his kingdom. Now things may finally speed up, as the recent marriages of his two eldest daughters to the heirs of houses Marbrand and Brax seem to be pacifying more and more lords of his kingdom. His niece's marriages into houses Morland and Prester also seem to have a positive effect. I think it can be safely stated now that Casterly Rock has once again regained full control over 2/3 of the west. The main holdouts are the houses in the south and east of the kingdom, for example the Cricklehalls, Leydens, Lefords and Paynes, and they only partially listen to Casterly Rock's demands. However, rumour has been circulating that King Willem is looking towards the daughter of Lord Tybalt Cricklehalle to marry his heir. That might tilt things even more in his favour in time, especially when you consider that he has a second son, third daughter and nephew that can be used for other alliances in the future. Thank you, Berthon. How likely do you estimate the ability of the Lannisters to raise a host against us this coming summer? He asked. Very unlikely, Your Grace. Even if King Willem manages to win over more of his lords, none will be jumping for another war. Some houses, like the Sarsfields and Marbrands, still haven't fully recovered from the war. Others will use their momentary autonomy to oppose and corrupt his goals and war plans should he make them. House Leford and its important border stronghold of the Golden Tooth seem, due to their marriage, closer to House Piper than to the Lannisters. They would actively oppose and hinder war against them. No, the Lannisters have much more to win from continued trade through the Gold Road and River Road, as well as our trading cogs that reach them from Seaguard and Barrowton. King Willem knows this. I don't expect him to try anything over the next years. Very well, thank you for your insights. Does anyone have anything else to add, or does someone disagree with the given analysis? He asked, but none spoke up, so he continued on. How fare the Iron Islands? Lord Jason Mallister spoke up. Still the same story with them, Your Grace. Trade flourishes and the Harlaws keep them in check, but discontent remains widely spread. Many of the young and ambitious leave the islands and turn to piracy in the Stepstones together with the mess of pirates that are already there. However, still no recorded attacks on any of our ships in the Sunset Sea, which is good enough for me for now. He nodded. The Mallisters had been century-old enemies of the Ironborn. Lord Jason and his heir Patrek were monitoring the situation closely. The payments of tribute still come in each year. None of the houses, big or small, have even dared to delay payments. OS added. However, all of the Ironborn hostages have by now reached the age of 16 and have been returned to their homeland. The threat of the hostages cannot keep them in line anymore, although some of those may look favorably upon the North if they have kept good memories of the North during those years. Lord Harley's Hornwood remarked. What about Pike and Saltcliffe? How about the Thrall Islands? Sir Willis Mandaily asked. Lord Jason shrugged. Not much has changed. They still appear to be a blend of Ironborn and Andal culture for now, although it can be said that noble families have established themselves on the Isles. The Harlaws have turned to marriages to try and integrate them into the Ironborn culture, with many higher and lower heirs on the Isles married to daughters from Harlaw and Black Tide. For now, the Ironborn's hold on the two islands remains feeble. He nodded. Good, the Stormlands. Lord Lothar Mallory spoke up. Things are going well. The lands have largely replenished from the past wars. The Carons have once again regained a stronghold over Night Song. Queen Shireen's reign is well liked, and additional trade from the Free Cities, Riverport and Duskendale are filling the coffers of many of the Storm Lords. With the problems in the Stepstones, Pentos and Myr chose to trade more with the Storm Lords than the south and east of Essos, and it is benefiting them. Oh, it is benefiting us as well. Believe me on that. Sir Willis Marndale bellowed, and many lords laughed heartily. He smiled as well. Trade had been especially well this spring due to the problems in the Stepstones. Trade through it had become nearly impossible, and many merchants from Lorath, Bravos, Pentos, Myr and even Tioche had chosen to come to the east side of West Eos to find new wares instead of risking the dangerous journey. Lord Mallory continued. Relations across the border are very good. Both with the houses on the south side of the Blackwater and the houses of the Narrow Sea. Small trade has been flourishing in the area, with Riverport on our side as the main trading hub. On their side it is split between High Tide, Sweetport and Wentwater Bridge. He nodded contently. Dawn. Sir Willis shrugged. All trade with them has ceased, but it wasn't much to begin with. The extra trade from the free cities more than makes up for it. Princess Ariane is preparing a second force to strike at the pirates in the Stepstones, after the first campaign failed last year. Rumor has it that she is organizing a coalition consisting of Lies, Tioche, Volantis and Bravos to get rid of the problem. John added. Good, the added trade benefits are good for now, but they can't hold. Better that trade through the Stepstones resumes in the future. Sir Willis, Lord Jason, I want your families to keep eyes on the stories that sailors bring with them to your ports. If those pirates are broken, I expect a lot of angry and disappointed Ironborn to make their way back to our shores. I want all houses on the Sunset Sea to be warned and prepared before they make it back. Any Ironborn that dares to attack our ships or people will be returned to the Iron Isles without a head. He ordered. Certainly, Your Grace. Both loyal men called out. Now, the Reach. He asked, and the collective sigh was a good measure of how people thought about the situation in the room. Parts of the Reach are replenishing awfully quick from the war, as the Tyrells have fully opened their coffers once more. Most of the inland territories, as well as the Marcher areas, have fully replenished from the war. The Shield Islands have been repopulated and their garrisons are once again similar to what they were before the Great War. This has allowed the mouth of the Marndale to start replenishing as well, and trade is once again finding Highgarden and its downriver ports freely. Roderick Dustin answered. Yes, that sums it up. Patrek writes to me that merchants from Dawn and the Westerlands are flooding in and out of the Reach. He personally spoke to a captain that had anchored in Old Town only a few months ago. He told me that the city seems as busy as when he was just a sailor under his father before the Great War. It was a stroke of genius of Willers Tyrell to give House Hightower back the privileges and titles that they had lost after Robert's rebellion. The Hightowers have emptied their coffers and are ably replenishing their lands. It will take 2 more decades before the city once again reaches 500,000 people, as the hinterlands can't provide the food needed to sustain the population for now, but the lands are healing rapidly. The Reach's shores are still severely depopulated and the Arbor barely supports half of its pre-war population, but at this rate these issues will largely be dealt with in the next 2 decades. Now that the Tyrells are once again producing over 85% of their pre-war food production, they can easily fuel population replenishment in these areas in the next years, and fishing ships are already expecting that competition will rise in the next years. The old Lord of Seaguard explained. Are we at least sharing in the profits through trade? He asked. Barely, Hendry Bracken replied. The new major road from Bitterbridge to Riverrun yields only half the trade that we expected it to. Our traders are also being shunned by many noble houses in the Reach. It is so bad that it is delaying our efforts to restore the southwest of the Riverlands. He sighed. Which areas are most affected? The heir to Stonehenge looked into his eyes. We are, both Vances, the Pipers, the new border lords, namely the Mennings and the Parrells, the Leicesters, the Tullys, both in Riverrun, and Harrenhal and Stony September is also suffering. However, minor setbacks are noted all over the southern, western and central Riverlands. He didn't like that one bit. I would like to nuance that a bit. OS spoke up. You need to keep in mind that the increased trade on the eastern coast, as well as Seaguard, has trickled inward as well. The result of that is increased growth in the northern and eastern parts of the Riverlands. Additionally, many houses in the center of the Riverlands have also benefited from this throughout the river systems. Stony September, Harrenhal, Fairmarket and even Riverrun have seen extra trade which partially makes up for the lost profits. He looked to the Bracken heir to confirm whether this was true, and he shrugged. It was clear that the Brackens were hurting, and many of their allies and neighbors too, but that the situation wasn't completely bleak. I will write a letter to Willers Tyrell about lords scorning our merchants. Until then, I want the local lords to use the route to trade better with Riverrun and Stony September and by way of the river systems reach the narrow sea when the Reach doesn't want to trade. He replied, and most of his council seemed to support that decision. What else is new? He asked. The Faith Militant tried to set up 3 chapter houses outside of the Reach this year. The first one next to the keep of a knightly house sworn to house Selmy in the Stormlands. Lord Selmy dealt with it swiftly on the Storm King's orders. A small battle ensued between both forces. Of the 47 knights, 30 were captured and later beheaded by the king consort, whilst all the poor fellows had been executed on the battlefield by Lord Selmy. Apparently, King Consort Edric has sent the heads of the beheaded knights to the Starry September to warn them not to cross into the Stormlands again. Berthon spoke up. Many at the table grinned. The Storm Kingdom was proving to be a valuable ally. What happened to the knight who hosted them? Lord Hornwood asked their spymaster. Berthon shrugged. His head and that of his brothers still adorn the gates above Storm's End as a warning to their own vassals not to invite the fanatics over. This seemed to shock Bracken and Mallory, whilst most of the others at the table grinned wider. That is very good news, because the Starry September has been recruiting. A knight sworn to one of my vassals has left my lands recently to join them in Old Town. They are building a standing army and they have built bases all over the Reach, not coincidentally often close to our borders. Lord Deddings spoke up. That was worrisome, when knights left their homeland to join religious fanatics. However, isolated cases could be managed as long as they weren't allowed to gain footing outside the Reach or Dawn. Their second attempt was in the lands of House Payne on our border in the Riverlands. However, Casterly Rock managed to force them to stop it. This wasn't easy for the Lannisters and House Payne was not punished, but the Faith Militant has left. Interesting to note is that 2 cousins of Lord Cedric Payne have joined the order together with dozens of other knights from the Westerlands and they have left for the Reach. Berthon continued. This led to a lot of murmuring in the room. Whilst it was good that they were expelled from the West, it didn't sit good that the perpetrators on their own borders hadn't been punished and that the religious extremists had been able to grow in numbers once more. Their last attempt had been the most surprising. They had been invited by a new local noble on Saltcliffe in the Iron Isles. However, a coalition of Ironborn under House Harlaw with the support of a few local ex-thrall families managed to attack the base, killing all the fanatics and most of their supporters before they grew too large. The spymaster concluded. Most in the room showed the same combination of shock and relief. They are trying to get settled on the Iron Isles. This could break the delicate balance that has now been established on the Isles. Lord Jason Mallister asked worriedly. They are. However, I have personally received word from Lord Harlaw that precautions have been made so they will never take hold again. Neither Lord Roderick Harlaw, nor his heir Sir Harris, have ever failed to keep their word until now. Lord Roderick is becoming old and blind but remains true to his word and in turn the Ironborn have prospered through trade. He and his heirs greatly stand to benefit if the status quo continues. They will ensure it does. He replied, which managed to pacify his lords. What's next on the agenda? He asked John. You wish to wait with the news from House Royce? His brother asked and he nodded in response. Then it's the infrastructure projects planned for this summer. His hand of the king read from a scroll in front of him. Lord Dustin spoke up. In short, we will aim to expand the roadway system in the north with emphasis on the Hornwood and the Mountain clans, as well as the roads in the former gift. Lord Harleys looked pleased at that. His house had long been left out of the development plans, but not any longer. Further loans will be made available to riverlords on the borders to fortify their keeps. Specifically, we would want the newly established houses that lay on the southern border to increase their efforts now that the threat of the Reach increases. A similar loan will be proposed to House Shield, to better help them prepare for any future Ironborn threats. His Master of Infrastructure continued. This was met with approval by many at the table, as it was clear that they were anticipating any foreign threats beforehand. However, I would ask the Council for more time to make up the details of these plans, as they are not finished. I will come back to you with more by the next meeting. I can say that all plans that were made last summer have been successfully completed and that all extended loans have had sufficient effects. On that note, all agreed to discuss more later. Next up is the demographic situation. John called out. This winter has made the least number of casualties in the north in recorded history. This has allowed many of the children of the so-called baby boom to survive the winter. All these children, born in the spring and long summer after the war winter, are now between the ages of 7 and 15. The best example of them is our esteemed Crown Prince here. All looked towards his son. He gazed proudly upon the boy, as he met the eyes of the councillors without flinching. The parchments in front of him seemed full of scribbles and notes that he had been making, and he smiled. Many boys of his age would be bored out of their mind in these meetings, but he seemed to take governing to heart. He knew that it helped that he could try to impress his father afterwards, but that made it even more worth it in his personal opinion. The current population of the North is around 3,800,000 people after losses past winter. It is expected that the native adult population will rise significantly all across the North, and the overall population as well once they start having children. This will start in 2 years and will continue for almost a decade. Not all areas will profit of this as much as others, but all will benefit. The main centers of population growth are the Stark and Sewin lands, the Barrowlands and the lands around Torrens Square, and the areas around the White Knife. The nobles present from these areas nodded happily. The rulers of these lands have all agreed to send a portion of the extra available manpower to help populate remote regions of the north. All have agreed to send people towards the Moat Cailin area. Houses Dustin and Tall Heart have also vowed to send people towards the Stony Shore. The Sewins and the Starks will send more people to my own lands, as well as the former gift. The Marndalis, Woolfields and Locks have agreed to steer people towards the new farmlands around Hornwood and the Sheephead Hills and will allow a small amount of people to move towards the Blackwater. John explained. Even more people towards the Blackwater? Hendry Bracken asked annoyingly. There is a huge shortage of fishermen and sailors in those parts. Lord Roderick Sumber has personally written to us to ask if the North can spare any, as the men in the region are spread thin between Solpants, Maidenpool, Duskendale, Riverport and minor villages and towns. He wishes to expand his trading fleet to be able to take advantage when the Stepstones are freed in the coming years. Many in the council agreed with the man's business acumen, but the Bracken heir wasn't satisfied. I do not agree that importing northerners is the way forward. Already close to 100,000 of these have settled in the Riverlands and their number is increasing due to the high birth rates. This will be the cause for additional strife in the area and the whole of the Riverlands at large. The knight countered. John didn't agree, neither did he. All estimates point towards the fact that around 50,000 northerners have settled in the Riverlands over the past 20 years, of whom at least 5,000 are veterans that fought and bled for your freedom, with another 25,000 being their families and kinsmen. The others have largely been invited by the rulers of these lands. His brother pointed out. Besides, their presence has, as asked by House Tully, been restricted to the lands of only 5 families: the Blackwoods, Goodwoods, Rossbice, Sumbers and Hayfords. John continued. No strife has been recorded, except on the lands of the Rossbice and Hayfords. The former has largely been resolved, with the latter being controlled. The influx has been noted as very beneficial by the 3 other houses. That is true. My son-in-law is the nephew of Lord Sumber, and his uncle often writes him the question to send more sailors and tradespeople from White Harbour towards his city. Apparently, the people of my family's lands are more tolerant and able to work well along both southerners and northerners, and he asks for them specifically. Sir Wylis Marndaly boasted proudly. That seems to be true. The records of intermarrying between the 7 believing settlers of White Harbour and old remaining population of King's Landing seem to be extremely high in the city. In the farmlands around the city more Old Gods believers have settled, but there too can be seen relatively high numbers of intermarrying between the natives and the northern settlers. Besides, my nephew is the Lord of Hayford. Ever since he has come of age 6 years ago, the volatile situation there has been dealt with. The lands just needed its lord and lady to be present. The years of absence when they were educated in Winterfell took their toll. This last winter, he has won over the hearts of many. The region even seems to be thriving ever since spring has come along. Lord Cleesewin interjected as well. Bracken scoffed. That doesn't nullify the fact that curses about it are regularly heard all across the Riverlands. If we don't want our knights to leave disgruntled, like the aforementioned subject of Lord Deddings, then we should stop the migration to those areas. The economic benefit is not worth the trouble that it is creating in our lands. This was news to him. He knew many still grumbled about the situation at the Blackwater, but not that it was this much of a talking point. However, it could just be the case that the Brackens were vindictive about the situation because it had strengthened both branches of House Blackwood too. Not even their seat on the council had fully managed to pacify those feelings. He shared a look with John. We will look into the matter on the ground further before answering Lord Sumber's request. Besides, many of the sailors in White Harbour will be necessary to man your own fleets. I heard that you have built another ship last month, Sir Willis. He changed the subject. A beautiful trading cog named the Sea Breeze. It will be captained by the son of an accomplished captain that has sailed for us for 15 years. Its first destination will be Bravos, which will be its usual route to take part in the lumber trade. The old heir to White Harbour replied. Back to the population discussions, John. He looked to his brother. The Riverlands show much of the same trends. A baby boom occurred during the same period after the devastation of the war. The population growth will be welcomed greatly, as the Riverlands lost over 1 million people during the war and the former Crown lands many as well. The expected growth will allow many abandoned fields to be resown and desolate hamlets and villages in the south to be resettled. A thing for everyone to look forward to. He summarized, and all agreed. Cracklaw Point is much the same. Lord Rupert Brune picked in. Our population has steadily risen with the extra lands we received after the Staunton Rebellion, combined with the exemption of taxes and the good relations with House Mouton that allow for extra trade. That is very good to hear, Lord Rupert. If there is anything more that we could do for your region, don't hesitate to ask me or John. Cracklaw Point has long been forgotten under the Targaryens and especially the Baratheons and Lannisters. It won't be under my rule. He responded, which Lord Brune greatly seemed to appreciate. Next up there is another matter. The ambassador of House Royce was not only here to tell me about the situation in the Vale. He came to formally ask for the hand of my daughter, Princess Birina, for Allard Royce, Sir Anders' only son. He shared with the room. All looked at him in surprise, but the only pair of eyes he showed interest in were those of his son. The boy's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets at the mention of one of his little sisters. Nevertheless, he managed to remain quiet. Princess Birina, Your Grace. Not her older sister Princess Sarah? Clee asked. In all fairness, he asked for the hand-on of one of them. During lunch, I spoke to my wife. Together we decided that Birina's spirit would suit the Vale far better than Sarah's would. He explained. You are accepting the offer then? Lord Deddings asked. We are leaning towards accepting it, but we haven't formally decided. I wished to hear your opinion on the matter first. This seemed to stroke the egos of his lords, which was a thing most of them liked above all else. It surely has its merits. Young Allard will soon be the heir to Runestone and is the most prized bachelor in the Vale since his cousin the Crown Prince's wedding. It would tie us together even more with the Vale and ensure peace with our allies for the next generation, maybe even multiple. The Arryns couldn't hope to challenge us without the aid of their most powerful bannerman. Sir Willis Mandaily replied. He had expected the Mandaily Knight to be favourable towards the proposal. The Mandailis had great trade interests in the Vale, and he had recently betrothed one of his granddaughters to the hunter heir. A deal which gave the Mandailis access to their Whitestone quarry, as well as ensured a steady stream of food coming from the Vale. Others, like Lords Deddings, Brune and Hornwood, also voiced their support for the proposal. Lord Jason Mallister mentioned a concern that he had been expecting. It is a great opportunity, Your Grace. However, I would like to remind you to not forget about the nobility of the Riverlands. Many felt abandoned after you announced that your two eldest children wouldn't marry one from their midst. I understand Lord Mallister, however that has already been explained. For Edara there was a clear lack of candidates. Most nobles, in both the North and the Riverlands, only married after the war. All the eligible heirs were at least 5 years younger than her. Goran Glover was one of the few exceptions, and they are very happy together. Already, they have been blessed with 2 sons. He countered. I agree, Your Grace, and I understand your choice of Lady Umber for the Crown Prince. It connects him to much of the nobility of the north, as well as houses Sumber and Riker along Blackwater Bay. All I'm saying is that many of my countrymen will not look fondly about being passed over once more. Lord Jason replied courteously. You are right, of course. That's why the Queen and I have decided that my second daughter Sarah will be married into the Riverlands nobility. Another one of my 2 youngest children will also marry into your peerage, but they are too young to discuss betrothals yet. This seemed to pique the interest of all the riverlords at the table. Your Grace is wise and forward-looking as ever. The Lord of Seaguard responded contently. As of now, I will be officially accepting offers for her hand. Nonetheless, a decision on the matter may take many more months. Mallister and Bracken were visibly excited by the prospect. Everyone at the table knew that Lord Jason's grandson and Henry Bracken's son would be viable contenders for his daughter's hand, and her extensive dowry. He would consider both of these together with other offers in due time. It was of course something that he had himself thought about long before. His own maternal lineage had won over the Riverlords in the first place. After he, John, Sansa and Arya married northern spouses, murmuring had already occurred. This had cleverly been evaded by Bran's marriage to Bethany Blackwood, but had sparked up harder and fiercer after Edara's marriage to House Glover. When he had announced Ricard's betrothal to Alara Umber, a small riot had broken out amongst some of them. Nevertheless, the choice was a clear one. The Umbers had built a gigantic network of allies, all connected by marriages to the main Umber line. The lords or heirs of houses Carstark, Hornwood and Riker had married an Umber bride, whilst the heiress of House Mondaly had married Harmond Umber as her consort. Roderick S. Umber also ruled Riverport in his own right. Alara's mother, Lyra Mormont, brought him more useful connections to the Mormonts and Shields, who had been elated about the betrothal. On top of that, Roderick, Harmond and Smalljan were now making new alliances of their own with their adolescent children. No house in his kingdom had this network of alliances in place which he could marry his son into. The only house that came close was House Bracken, with marriages to houses Tully, Blackwood, Deary and Leicester and blood relations to the new House Mossbridge. The problem was that Lord John O's and Sir Henry Bracken were too greedy for power. They would use the marriage to try to populate his court in Winterfell with their puppets, like they had done in Riverrun. A thing which he would never allow. Besides, both Alis and he wanted a northern queen to succeed her. If he truly wanted to establish a free northern kingdom, he needed to limit Riverlander influence in Winterfell at the start. It was especially important on the influence she would have on his future grandchildren. However, both Alis and he had agreed that Ricardze would have to marry into the Riverlands, as their proud nobility would never accept to be snubbed thrice in a row. Does anyone have any other objections towards the Royce proposal? He asked, to go back to the original topic. None spoke up. Very well, then I will accept it. I plan to hold the discussions with him the day after tomorrow. I don't have to tell all of you that I don't want this leaking out before the negotiations are completed. The marriage of a princess is a serious matter. I don't want anything to spoil before the official announcement. He looked around the room to everyone, but his eyes rested on his son in front of him. He knew that it would be difficult, but the boy would need to be taught to keep silent when necessary. For the dowry, the Royces have inquired about the options of trade benefits with Riverport, Duskendale, Maidenpool and White Harbour. They will try to use this to get further ahead of House Grafton and better their situation in the Vale. Giving them all of those is unacceptable, but some might be possible. What do you think? He asked them. Sir Willis Mondaly spoke up first. In all honesty, Your Grace, I see very little benefit for White Harbour to do so. We already a lot of trade with the whole of the Vale, and extra benefits for the Royces might hurt more than it helps. He agreed with that. White Harbour was too important to allow that. Lord Rupert Brune spoke up next. Maidenpool might be a good idea. Trade has been booming and the city has been rebuilt, but still the Mutongs have trouble rivaling Duskendale. It might benefit Cracklaw Point too in the long run. Interesting idea, Lord Rupert. Would it be beneficial for your region if we give them some benefits for Cracklaw Point directly as well? I was thinking of your own keep of Deden, for example. Lord Rupert slowly scratched through his beard with his finger. No great volumes could be transported from Deden, but for some special shipments it might help us greatly if you could make it possible. He smiled. I will try. He looked across the rest of the room. What about Duskendale and Riverport? I don't think it a good idea. Duskendale is already growing at an astonishing rate, whilst Riverport has become a prosperous trade hub with the Stormlands. It would only be seen as preferential treatment and reduce the impact on Maidenpool. Lord Danwell Deddings countered. He agreed with that assessment. Any other ideas? What about Solpants? It could help the town grow, if it gets a steady stream of trade with Royces. From there, it could be transported on barges across the northern and central riverlands. It would be a huge boon to both us and the Royces. Lord Jason proposed. I like that idea. I will keep that in mind. Possibilities for deals on Cracklaw Point, Maidenpool and Solpants, but none of the others. Anything else on the topic of the betrothal? What about the rest of your family? Will any more betrothals be made? Lord Lothar Mallory asked. Whom of my family do you think of, Lord Lothar? Prince Rukan, or the children of your brothers and sisters, your grace? His vassal replied. He sighed. As you know, Prince Rukan has left for Esso 6 months ago with many of his noble companions. After visiting Bravos, Pentos and Myr, he has recently departed the latter city to travel to Volantis overland. He has found a mercenary company heading there, which will accompany and protect him through the often hostile terrain. He has no intention to marry, as of now. The last sentence still seemed to elicit that annoying smile from his great-uncle. Now concerning the children of my brothers and sisters. If you wish to know about my sister's children, I would ask them or the children's fathers. One of them is here amongst us, if you would like to start. He told him, as he nudged toward Clee. For John's children, it is the same. He is a lord in his own right and can and will make the decisions of his family on his own. Besides, his eldest daughter Lyanna will soon marry House Tallheart's heir. He continued, whilst looking at his brother. John simply nodded at his remark. Lastly, you have Brandon's children. All 3 of them are too young to discuss betrothals. These will eventually be decided by my brother and me together, but it is far too early for that. As announced, his son Prince Brindon will soon leave to be fostered with his cousins at Raventree Hall. In time, he will squire for his uncle Lord Brindon Blackwood to earn his spurs. Any more questions? All his councillors moved their heads to say no. Any updates on the treasury? Everything remains positive. The huge amounts of coin that we had after the war are in the past now, and we have spent a lot with the food imports for the winter, but the finances remain very good. The income is picking up again now that trade is steadily expanding as the weather improves. OS responded. He nodded in thanks. Master of Laws? He asked Lord Mallister. Not much to report on. 3 prisoners have been sent to the wall. They joined the convoy of a handful of others coming from Barrowton last week. No riots or uprisings have been reported anywhere, nor are any of our laws being contested by nobles as of this point. Thank you, Lord Mallister. Master of Ships. He turned to Sir Willis. Everything goes well. Our trade fleets in White Harbour, Barrowton, Seaguard, Duskendale, Maidenpool and Riverport continue to grow steadily. Lord Dustin and I are drawing up plans to enlarge the harbours at Barrowton and Seaguard to increase both our trading and military fleet's capacity there. Militarily, we want both towns to support 3 additional war galleys to prevent the Ironborn from having any funny ideas in the future. This plan was met with support, as no one wanted to be surprised by the Ironborn ever again. Very well then, I close this council meeting here. I will see most of you next month. Maester John O's, will you leave the report of the meeting here? I would like to look it over some time later. Of course, Your Grace. The Maester answered. All his councillors picked up their papers and walked out of the room whilst talking to each other in hushed tones. Clee patted Ricard's back as he left, and not much later no one remained apart from him, his 15-year-old son and his grand-uncle. Sir Brindon always remained, as member of the Kingsguard. Sometimes he joined in their conversations, giving invaluable insights to his young heir. Other times he silently stood guard. He took place on one of the normal chairs in the middle of the table, as his son took the one beside him. Ricard spread out his notes in front of him and looked up at him expectingly. "Now son, what have you learned today? I know you must have at least 100 questions for me." He grinned. His young heir grinned back. "At least, father." They both laughed heartedly together, before bowing over the notes Ricard had made during the council as well as the report that the maester had made. He listened closely as his eldest son started recounting the meeting, a feeling of pride once again filling him from within. All the while, their two direwolves played in front of the fire. Father and son spending some time together, just like they were doing. Chapter 80, The Wayward Son Returns. 22F. There is a 3-year time jump since last chapter. Check out the detailed family tree in the bio of my profile. Just delete the spaces between the parts of the link. The Tully family tree has also been added. Rob. They arrived in the largest city of the north under the guidance of the warm afternoon sun. The weather had been clear for most of their trip and food had been plenty. The forests were filled with game, whilst wild rabbits lived in many of the hills. The fish in the White Knife and its tributaries were plenty and they had made good time. The southern parts of the north looked like another country in summer, but he knew better. In winter, the White Knife would freeze over and the fish would be out of men's reach. The animals in the forests would disappear and the glowing hills would be covered by a carpet of snow and ice, often many feet deep. Summer was beautiful and they all hoped it would be long, but it would never last. Stark knew that summer was simply the time to prepare for winter. He had long started preparations and it seemed that they were necessary earlier than expected. Nevertheless, he had enjoyed the seasonal differences on the land. What he had especially liked, were the other changes. On his way south, he had passed at least 24 new hamlets and villages. Some on his own lands, which he knew well. Others were on the Sewin or Dustin lands. Even around White Harbor, new settlements seemed to have sprung up. At the gates of the city, they were welcomed by Harmond Umber. He was the consort to the heir and was designed to accompany him to the castle. On all sides of the roads stood thousands of people waiting to see their king and queen. He waved and smiled at them, and so did Alice. His wife had changed out of her carriage a few miles before the city and had chosen to ride next to him as they made an entrance. Behind them rode their two youngest children. John rode alone on a small mare and Margaret Stark was seated together with his mother. Their 3 direwolves leisurely walked beside them to show their prowess, with Ghost only 1 row behind them. His youngest daughter seemed to love the people's attention and she waved and blew kisses towards them all under the encouragement of his mother. His son John merely looked interested at the city around him, not the people. He had never been to White Harbor before, and his 11-year-old son had been very excited to see the sailors and the silversmiths at work. The cries of excitement of his 7-year-old daughter grew louder and louder as they got closer to the keep. She was the only one from his family who hadn't been to the Riverlands yet, therefore these were the most southern-style buildings that she had ever seen. They passed under the portcullis and were greeted with a small crowd of people waiting for them upon arrival. When he jumped off his horse, Lord Willis Marndale bowed and ceremoniously called out, "White Harbor is yours, Your Grace." 2 familiar faces went to one knee next to the new Lord of White Harbor. To his left bowed his own brother. Bran seemed to have completed the trip before him, which wasn't surprising as Moat Cailin was much closer to White Harbor. To his right bowed Lord Willis' young grandson Sir Wyman Marndale. He knew the future heir of House Marndale well, as he had been fostered in Winterfell for several years. At the age of 14 he had left fosterage to gain his spurs for 3 years at the side of Lord Donal Locke. Curiously, his daughter and heir Winifred only stood behind them on the second row. "Thank you, Lord Willis. It is always a pleasure to be under the roof of one of my most loyal bannermen," he replied, as he motioned for them all to get up. "First and foremost, I would once again want to show my condolences about the loss of your father. Lord Wyman was one of the most intelligent advisors that I ever had. He was an invaluable source of guidance in my early reign, and it would be hard to find a more loyal or capable vassal than him anywhere in the kingdom. My house mourns his loss almost as much as yours does." He spoke loudly, for all in the courtyard to hear. "I thank you for your kind words, Your Grace. The loss of my father weighs heavily on the entire household. Nevertheless, we will endure. The Mondalis have protected the mouth of the White Knife for House Stark for over 1,000 years. This will never change. The new head of House Mondaly responded. Thank you, Lord Willis. I have no doubts that you will serve just as capable as your intelligent father. He voiced, which seemed to please the new head of House Mondaly. Come, Your Grace. Let me introduce you to my household. The stout Lord of White Harbor spoke. Bran walked over to him first. I know this one Mondaly. This is no vassal of yours. He laughed and many in the courtyard joined in. They hugged fondly. Good to see you, brother, it has been too long. It has, but only because you deemed it my job to rebuild your damned fortress. His younger brother laughed loudly. It was the right choice. You are doing a fine job. He smiled, as he let go of his brother so he could greet Mother and John. Next up was Sir Wyman Mondaly. He greeted the young knight warmly, as did Alice. Did Prince Ricard accompany you, Your Grace? The young Mondaly asked. Sadly, he didn't. He oversees Winterfell, whilst we are down here. However, he will accompany me to Seaguard for the marriage of his sister in 4 months. If you would wish it, I would be happy to have you accompany us. He answered. The lad gladly agreed, which brought a proud smile on his grandfather's face. It was clear that Willis wanted his successors to remain close to Winterfell. A thing which he wholeheartedly supported. The Mondalis were one of his principal bannermen, and White Harbor was growing by the day. Good relations were more important than ever. Winifred was as kind as ever, as she rejoined her husband. However, both seemed to play second fiddle in comparison to their own children and especially young women, which he found strange. Nevertheless, the Mondaly family seemed close and she seemed preoccupied with greeting her sister Wyler and her niece and nephews. He was also introduced to Sir Wyman's new bride Alyssa Locke. She was the youngest daughter of Lord Donal Locke and was the last significant move that the old Lord Wyman had made on the political Civasse board. A shrewd move tying House Mondaly's closest neighbor even closer to them. They were led inside of the keep and shown their rooms. His daughter quickly ran off to play with Winaldar Mondaly, Harmond and Winifred's youngest child. Little John asked him permission to run off with John's eldest son Edric and Wynder Mondaly, the second son of House Mondaly. He both let them, but not without a Kingsguard and their direwolves to accompany them. It was good to foster true and honest relations with their vassals' children, but it was foolish to run around this castle without protection. White Harbor now counted over 60,000 inhabitants, infiltrating it wouldn't be too difficult for someone with bad intentions. After freshening up, he wanted to go pray. He told the Mondaly knight as much, and the young man had surprised him by proposing to join him. Sir Wyman Mondaly, his father Harmond Umber, John, Bran and he rode towards the Wolf's Den together with their guards and retainers. Together they prayed for a while, before riding back towards the new castle. Sir Wyman, it surprises me that you still keep true to the old gods of your father instead of the new gods of your mother. He voiced on their ride back. I keep to both, Your Grace. I am a Mondaly and I was named in the light of the 7. Nevertheless, my father and House Umber have always kept to the old gods. I pray to both equally, which I think suits my lands. Whilst most of White Harbor's population prays to the 7, outside of the walls it is the other way around. In total the number of 7 believers in our lands is dwarfed by the old gods' believers. I don't find it wrong that the Lord adheres to both customs. The young knight replied. That is an interesting way of thinking. How do the pious vassals of White Harbor respond to this? He asked him. Most stopped caring once it became clear that I adhered to all the customs that my house had always followed. I visit the septs every 7th day and have prayed with many of them over the years. I have been knighted with the Earls of the 7 in the September of the Snows like my grandfather and his ancestors before him. Only 1 or 2 surly families keep remarking upon it, but the vast majority doesn't care anymore. He replied. Do your siblings believe the same? No, and that might help with the vassals too. My sisters only follow the 7, whilst my brother keeps to both as well. Nevertheless, Wynder tends to lean towards the 7 too, whilst I keep to both in similar capacity. It might have something to do with the time that I have spent with my father and the years in Winterfell and Oldcastle. The young man shrugged. It was an interesting piece of information that he would discuss with his family later, for now they needed to get back to the keep. Many people still took to the streets when they saw them ride back from the wolf's den, but the presence of grey wind, summer and ghost deterred them from ever blocking their way. That night, the Mandaelis hosted a great feast in their honor. Almost all of their vassals attended, as did many neighboring houses like the Locks, the Woolfields and the Hornwoods. The actual funeral of Lord Wyman had already passed weeks before, but the feast was still held in his memory. The next morning, he had an audience with Lord Willis. His usual master of ships had been absent from the council the past 3 months, and he wanted to catch up with him on what was going on. He also had some things to discuss with him. His son John would spend the morning with his namesake uncle and his sons exploring the harbour and the fleet. Young Wynder Mandaeli would accompany them, as well as the young sons from houses Lock and Hornwood. Margaret would spend the early day with Alis, Winifred and Lady Berena Hornwood, formerly Umber, and their daughters. John's youngest daughter Wenda would join them too. They had planned to do some embroidery together. They would all join together for lunch, as the ship was expected to arrive in the afternoon. He walked up to the solar together with Cedric Sewin. Edara's old sworn shield was one of his usual wolf's guard now, as he had no one to protect anymore ever since his eldest married into House Glover. Tor usually protected the queen. The third senior member of his guard, Harmond Turrell, had sadly passed away last winter. His replacement had been Sir Pardrick Peage, Halman Peage's second son. The young knight was very impressive with a sword and had by now integrated well into the order. His uncle had become too old and sickly to travel with him. He had stayed home to rest and help advise Ricard where needed. In total, 4 Wolfsguard had joined him on his trip to White Harbour. Tor, Cedric, Sir Jeremy Biglestone and Sir Edmund Grey. While a 5th member of their order, namely Sir Benedict Blackwood, had accompanied Bran from Moat Cailin. This left 4 members, including his great-uncle, in Winterfell to watch over the rest of his family. A Mandaeli guardsman stood guard outside the pine-wooden door. He bowed before him first, notifying his lord of his arrival right after. Cedric took place next to the guard, while he entered. Lord Willis was as hospitable as ever. "Please, your grace, sit and have some wine. I wanted to talk to you about a matter of things, first of a family matter." He took a seat in front of the large man. The seat was decorated with soft cushions and wine, cheese and a variety of small raw fish were spread out on the table in front of him. He thanked his vassal for the gesture and took a small herring and a glass of light red wine. "A family matter, Lord Willis?" he asked. The stout lord sighed. "Aye, your grace. Over the last few years, we have heard rumblings from some of our vassals about my lack of a male heir. When my father sat on your council, it was I who ruled White Harbour with my daughter Winifred helping me as my heir. This led to some murmurings, but they grew much louder when my father and I swapped places. For the last 3 or 4 years, my father's health was slowly deteriorating. This, together with his somewhat larger size, made it difficult for him to perform some of his lordly duties. Winifred performed many of them, whilst my father spent more and more time grooming my grandson together with Harmond. During this period, open criticism started to be heard about Winifred's sex, not only by our own vassals but also by other northern nobles and contacts in the free cities. Since my father's passing, this criticism has taken new proportions. My daughter is very capable, but I fear that House Mandaelis' influence will decline due to the lack of respect that many seem to have for her. All of this simply because she is a woman?" he inquired. "Mostly, yes. You must remember that women ruling is not the norm in the north, and my daughter is no fierce Mormont. Many of my vassals are pious followers of the Seven, and they fear that Harmond, a believer of the old gods, will come to rule through her instead." Willis started explaining. "Harmond is a very capable man that has helped me and my father greatly over the last 2 decades. However, he has come down here with a few dozen of his friends from all over the north, and throughout the years many have acquired small lands in the area, either through marriage or by gift of my father for loyal service. Others, who have proven capable, have been gifted positions in the household. Some of the older families feel threatened, whilst even some of Harmond's old friends believe that a woman should not rule. Many of the merchant princes across the narrow sea feel the same way. He scratched his beard in contemplation. This was a serious issue. Ever since he had been a kid, the Mondalis had been steadfast and loyal. They had a firm grip on White Harbor and a lot of influence on the neighboring houses around them. During his reign, White Harbor had further grown in size and importance. If their succession was to become problematic, it would severely weaken his kingdom. That is a serious issue. I do not have an immediate solution. Nevertheless, you want me to help you? He asked. Your Grace, because I have a solution, but I need your help to reinforce it. The Lord of White Harbor responded. He simply raised his eyebrow, motioning him to continue talking. If I were to make my grandson Wiman the heir, all problems would go away. Most of the pious 7 believers would be pacified, as Wiman attends service with them every week. Many of Harmon's old friends and the few old gods-believing families native to the area would be elated, as they see my grandson as one of their own. He is an adult male Mondale, and a knight besides, which would also silence those nobles and foreigners skeptical of a woman's rule. Lord Willis unfolded his plan. He continued. More importantly, he has been groomed by my father for years and has become very capable under not only his, but also yours, mine, Lord Locke's and Harmon's, tutelage. He thought back about the talk that he had had with the young knight yesterday. He also thought back about the 5 years that the boy had spent with him and the boy's great-grandfather in Winterfell. Lord Wiman had spent some daily time with his great-grandson. He had taught him many important things about ruling, most of the time over a game of Sivas or a good meal. He had always known the young man to be capable, even during his childhood he had shown promise. What do you want from me, Lord Mondale? He asked carefully. I would want you to confirm my grandson as heir after I announce it, Your Grace. Skipping over Winifred is no small matter and many will try to use it to undermine my family. Some of the small folk may even openly oppose the decision, as my daughter is adored in the city. Having said that, none will ever question the decision when it is backed by their mythical king, who freed them from the shackles of the south. The older man explained, grinning slightly at the exaggeration at the end. He chuckled about the dramatic way the plan was presented too. I understand your reasoning, Lord Willis. I don't even oppose it. I know your grandson to be a promising young knight, who has the potential to be just as capable as his great-grandfather and namesake. He could see the pride well up in Mondale's chest as he praised his grandson. However, there is one big problem from me. He saw the eyebrows of the Lord in front of him tighten. What do Winifred and Harmon think of this? I will not make enemies of them. Harmon is a friend of mine and Winifred is a good friend of my wife and sisters. I will not stab them in the back. Willis Mondale simply smiled. This honors you greatly, Your Grace, but that is no problem at all. He rummaged through his desk until he got 2 sealed scrolls that he put in between them on the table. These are formal documents, containing both their acceptances of the plan. He explained. He picked up one of the scrolls and read it. I, Winifred Mondale, daughter of Lord Willis Mondale and heir to White Harbor, hereby relinquish my claim on my family's lands in favor of my son Sir Wiman Mondale and his line. I do this on the sole condition that I will be awarded with a financial endowment until the time of my death. The letter was not only written in her hand, but her seal was also applied to it. He recognized both from her correspondence with Alice. The next letter was the same, but with Harmon's name. What did they get for agreeing with this? He immediately asked. His vassal laughed loudly. Very shrewd response, Your Grace. Winifred will remain part of the Lord's Council until her death and will get a large endowment so she can spend the rest of her life in luxury while still advising me and later her children and remaining close to her family. He nodded approvingly. Winifred was an intelligent woman. White Harbor would benefit from her counsel. Harmon's is similar. He will be appointed as captain of the guards. This will allow him to stay near his son and protect him and his reign, a condition that he wouldn't budge on. Lastly, Harmon will be given some lands to the southeast of the city and all of its incomes. The lands include a small holdfast with a tower along the water, 2 fishing villages and a farming village, as well as a few spread-out farmsteads. These lands will be governed by Harmon until his death, after which they will be inherited by his second son Winder. He thought that over. The lands were unexpected, but it was a clever way to solve things. Harmon got lands to call his own, and by making the second Mandaeli son the heir, he got some independence from his eldest son and future lord. It also solved Winder's inheritance early, which might prevent strife with his brother when the time came. He carefully looked it all over for a second time, thinking of things that he might have forgotten. After a while, he simply looked in the eyes of his trusted advisor. This seems to be in order. When you declare Wyman your heir, I will support your decision. I even propose you do it in the remaining days that I am here, although not tonight. That way I can support you in person for most of your vassals and allies. Willie's face split open in a wide grin. Thank you, Your Grace. My grandson won't disappoint you after I am gone, I promise you that. I do not doubt it. He smiled back. Now I had something else to discuss with you as well, Lord Willis. I wanted your advice on a few things. Certainly, Your Grace, I am glad to be of service. The stout lord replied immediately. My council will undergo some changes in the future. Lord Jason Mallister has resigned from his job as Master of Laws, citing that he wishes to spend his remaining years with his son and grandsons. He has gone south with us on the King's Road but kept going towards the Riverlands. He will be in Moat Cailin by now and will help arrange the wedding of his grandson Jeffrey and my daughter Sarah. However, he needs to be replaced, and I would ask you for your advice on who you would nominate. He explained. Lord Willis thought about it for a little while, before commenting. You said that the council will undergo multiple changes. What are the others? My brother John has resigned as Hand of the King. He wants to focus on developing Sea Dragon Point and help his people survive the winter. Lord Harry on Carstark will be his replacement. Lord Carstark has served on the council before, and he was educated by Lord Ricard together with me. He will do well. He responded. Lord Harry on will do well. Carhold and White Harbour have held good relations for years now, and I will be looking forward to working together with him. The next generations of our families will call themselves family as well. Harmon's sister married Lord Harry on, and the Carstark heirs are cousins to my grandchildren. Lord Willis nodded and then smiled. Harry on held off on serving in my council for years now. Now that both his eldest sons are married and his heir Edric is expecting his first child with my Bolton niece, he feels like he can leave Carhold in safe hands and that his family is secure. Now back to the issue at hand, a successor to Lord Jason for the position of Master of Laws. Why not take someone with experience as advisor in the council? His vassal asked him. Who do you propose? He countered back with a question. Lords Sewin, Mallory and Deddings would fit the job. Lord Brune could be considered as well, I suppose. I myself would propose Lord Sewin, but I understand that you would need to tread lightly whilst balancing out the kingdoms. If it needs to be a Riverlander, I would go for Lord Mallory. The Lord of White Harbour responded. He nodded at that, both decent choices. Thank you, my lord. Now on to the outside news. I assume that you have heard of King Willers Tyrell's death. He asked his master of ships. Aye, your grace. They say that he suddenly never woke up. I hear that some have their doubts. He nodded. Whatever the case, he is dead now. His heir Prince Garland Tyrell will soon be crowned king. This may prove problematic. With Willers, the last vestiges of peace may perish. This Garland is said to be ambitious. Most of the traditional advisors in Highgarden like Olenna Tyrell, Randil Tarley, Baylor Hightower and Mathis Rowan have long died. I am told that the prince surrounds himself with other influential nobles of his age such as Lord Osgood Peake, Lord Gerald Hightower, Lord Humphrey Rowan, Sir Garth Footley and Sir Alan O'Kert. He will also be advised by older lords who were influential in his father's court such as Lord Hobber Redwine and the prince's uncle Lord Dickon Tarley. The Lord of White Harbour listened to him intently. He paused to take a sip of wine, before continuing his story. The problem with that is that most of these advisors are militaristic in nature. Lord Dickon Tarley sees in himself the successor to his father Randil and wishes to prove this on the battlefield on his own, instead of only as his late father's right hand. Lord Hobber Redwine wishes to restore his family's honour after their humiliation against the Ironborn decades ago. Lord Humphrey Rowan and Sir Garth Footley are documented to have openly cursed me and my house for the lands they had lost in the peace treaty almost 2 decades ago. To make matters worse, claimants of many knightly houses that once lived north of the Gold Road have settled in the court at Highgarden, some even befriending the prince. The frown upon Lord Willie's head steadily grew deeper. "Do you think that war is coming?" He scratched his bear. "I don't know. However, it will not come soon. The Reach is not yet ready for war and the new king will need to settle internal affairs first. He will need to placate the lords and show himself decisive. Afterwards, he could try to fulfill his ambition and try to reconquer lost lands. It seems that the faith militant has the ear of the young Tyrell prince too. This doesn't bode well." He inhaled sharply. "Yet, we have been saved by the Maesters for now. Only days after the death of the Tyrell king, they have announced the arrival of autumn. No war will be waged during winter. Nevertheless, we need to be prepared by summer. The White Raven, I have gotten one too. It seems that after the last long summer, the gods have only seen to give us a short one this time." Lord Marndale replied. He nodded. "However, most of the stocks are high enough. Have you started importing food?" We have. Massive shipments of grain, stockfish and dried fruits have been delivered over the last 2 months. These shipments will continue to arrive from both the Vale and Bravos over the next months, even increasing in volume. The stores of White Harbour and most of our vassals are full already and we are in the process of selling food to the Hornwoods, Woolfields, Slates and Sewins. Your brother has already inquired about this before your arrival, and we will start selling him specific foods for Moat Caillin's stores too." His vassal told him. "Very well, do you have any idea on how the other lords of the eastern coast are faring?" The Locks and Flints of Widow's Watch are importing food from the Vale as well. In lower quantities, but more than enough to fill their own personal stocks. The Boltons and Carstarks are importing some food from Bravos as well, although I don't know how much. The Scagassy seem to be buying some second hand from the Carstarks. Our harvests over the last 4 years have been plentiful as well. During those times we have sold grain to some of the neighboring houses. We sold some to Winterfell as well, Your Grace." "I remember." He nodded. "I have recently made a deal with Lord Anderois. He has agreed to sell Winterfell 10,000 tons of corn, barley, wheat and as much as 10,000 dried pumpkins. I count on your men and infrastructure to put them on 2 barges to sail up the White Knife. Your men will be compensated by me at their usual rates. You can send me a list of the costs afterwards." "Of course, Your Grace, that won't be a problem. I am in talks with Pentos and MYR too. Similar deals may come your way, but I will let you know before any shipment leaves harbour." His vassal simply bowed his head to signify his compliance. "May I ask how is the rest of the north faring?" "Less shipments of food have gone out from White Harbour than last autumn and late summer. Even with the extra deals and the number of shipments rising, less food will have come through my lands." Lord Willis asked. That is true. The north will be prepared for winter. The explanation to less passage through White Harbour is 5-fold. He commenced his explanation. "Firstly, we enjoyed a short winter. Many ate from their stores during much of the spring, whilst already replenishing them with fresher alternatives by early summer. Secondly, the Riverlands have once again become one of the bready biscuits of West Eos after their recovery. Many of its food surpluses go towards their towns in Duskendale, Riverport, Fairmarket and Maidenpool, but large shipments of grain, fruits and wines have continuously been transported north during the summer either from Seaguard or through the King's Road. Once temperatures drop, dried sausages will be imported as well as northern winter temperatures make them almost indefinitely storable." Lord Willis listened carefully, as it was White Harbour's business to know why there had been lower demand of their infrastructure. Thirdly, the north has produced more food than it has ever before. During spring and summer many new farmsteads and fishing villages were created now that the adult population has started growing. Fourthly, the emergence of Barrowton is finally bearing fruit, quite literally that is. Its harbour has been expanded and food imports from Seaguard and the Westerlands are becoming common. The Flints of Flint's Finger profit from the passing ships as well. Fifthly, as you mentioned, many lords have begun to import food themselves. For example, Lord Harry on Carstark has betrothed his daughter Lysara to the Blackwood heir. As part of their negotiations, the Blackwoods have been exporting parts of their excess foods from Maidenpool to Carhold every year. The Sumbers have arranged a similar deal with other Riverlander and Stormlander houses for House Umber. All in all, the north is in good hands. The southern and central parts of the kingdom will easily be able to survive a long winter. The east will hold its own. The problem areas for now are in the northwest. The lands of Houses Whitefy, Mormont, Glover, Shield, as well as the mountain clans aren't ready for winter yet, but food transports from the Reach, Riverlands and Westerlands are underway. I am confident that these areas will be able to feed their larger population during this winter as well. Thank you, Your Grace. To come back to the earlier point, what will you do about the Reach? Lord Willis inquired. I will extend extra loans to houses Mossbridge, Sumber, Paverell and Menning. All four are new houses on the border and some of their keeps aren't as strong as I would like them yet. This will hurt the royal coffers, but we can make it work. I will also look to create a plan to destroy all the undefendable crossings over the Blackwater in case of an invasion. If you have any additional ideas, be free to let me know. He replied. Very well, Your Grace. Now could you update me on the workings of the fleet here? Certainly. The stout man smiled proudly. They talked about the Mandaily fleet for the next hour and how he would deal with an invasion from the sea if there ever was to come one. Next, he had lunch with his own extended family and that of House Mandaily. He spent some more time with his family afterwards, until finally a guard disturbed them. Your Grace, a ship with direwolf sails has been spotted. It will make landfall in the harbour within the hour. He thanked the guard and picked his daughter Margaret up. Let's go prepare to welcome your uncle, will we? He asked her and she screamed her agreement loudly. Less than an hour later, they all found themselves on the docks in the harbour, as a large merchant cod in Pentosey style docked onto the pier. It sported a grey sail with a black direwolf on it. After the gangplank was installed, Shaggydock ran from the boat onto the pier. He ran past the whole family and all their direwolves until he reached solid ground, scaring many of the sailors and workers on the shore. Once on the ground he howled and whined happily, whilst rolling around in a patch of dirt next to a storage hut. Grey Wind looked at him for permission and he nodded. Immediately, his companion raced after his brother with the 3 other direwolves following behind him. They tackled their rolling brother and happily greeted each other with a collection of howls, bites and barks. Is it too obvious to say that he didn't like the water much? A voice laughed from behind him. When he turned around, he saw Rukan walking down the gangplank onto the pier. It was unmistakably his brother, but he had visibly changed. He was clad in a grey tunic of Isozi style without arms and a black direwolf was stitched on the front of it. On his belt hung an assortment of weapons. A northern sword, an Isozi dagger and a small, weird-looking axe. 2 throwing knives were bound around his right leg. His long auburn hair was kept in a bun behind his head to keep it out of his face. He sported a short, clean beard, but a white scar ran through it on the left side of his face. His face was bronzed like he had never seen before, but his blue eyes shone with mischief as they had always done. His uncovered arms sported more scars, small and large, and they consisted of significantly more muscle than when he had left. When Rukan stepped forward towards, it was clear that he was holding something against his chest behind a light black cloak, but he could not see what. He walked forward towards his little brother with his arms wide open, ready to squeeze him in a bear hug. When he got close, Rukan jumped back and held his hand out to keep him back. No, don't, please. You'll wake her. His eyebrows rose to his hairline, as he looked differently at the large bundle in his brother's arms. From behind him, their mother rushed eager to take her youngest child in her arms for the first time in almost 4 years. Oh Rukan, I have missed you so. I have been so worried. She cried out, for once forgetting all decorum. Rukan pushed her back gently, not allowing her to hug him, which she didn't like. What do you think you are doing, Rukan Stark? Do you think a bronze skin and some new scars make you too tough to hug your worried mother? She chastised him loudly. SHHT. Don't scream. You'll wake, oh damned be the gods. He cursed, as sleepy sounds could be heard from behind his cloak. By that time, Some of his brother's companions had left the ship and they stood behind Rukun. They all looked sheepishly, as expecting trouble which they didn't want to be a part of. Once Morgan Barclay saw him look at them, the long-absent Kingsguard quickly went to one knee. His brother's other companions quickly followed suit, but they all did their very best to look away from their family and avoid eye contact. Sir Edmund Blackwood seemed to have seen something very interesting in the sea below. His mother next to him looked at her youngest son in shock, and for once it was not because of his casual use of blasphemy. He shared looks with John, Bran and Alice, their eyes equally as large as his. "What is that?" she asked in shock. Rukun scoffed. "Really, mother? Who is that is what you should be asking. Let me present you to your youngest granddaughter, Valor," his brother told them, as he pulled away his cloak. They looked at the back of a small head of dark brown hair. Rukun twisted his arm and suddenly they looked into a pair of very young eyes. Those eyes were bright blue, tully blue. Her skin color was different than theirs. It reminded him of the Dornish somewhat. Once the little girl saw them all look at her in shock, she quickly hid back in Rukun's chest. "Who is that?" his mother almost screeched. His youngest brother rolled his eyes. "As I mentioned before, that is your granddaughter, mother. She doesn't look like a newborn," John remarked stoically. She had her first name day a few months before we shipped in Pentos," Rukun replied. "You hid a child for us for over a year?" Bran asked as his eyebrows were halfway up his forehead. "I have to tell you, brother, that is extreme even for you." Rukun scratched the back of his head. I didn't know how to tell you by letter. Best I show you, I thought. Before Rob ordered me to leave her behind or something." He looked towards his little brother. "Why would I ever ask you to leave our blood behind? She is yours, that much is clear from her eyes, even if the rest of her is foreign to us." Rukun let out a sigh. "I didn't know how you would react. Best to be prepared for the worst," his brother explained. Their mother cut them off. "Send her back." "Why would Rob do that? What kind of a name is Valor? Did you marry an Isozi woman without telling us? Where is this woman?" Their mother started ranting and he had to do his best not to look away in embarrassment. His mother was the only one who hadn't judged the situation well. A small look of sadness passed over Rukun's face and he hugged the little girl in his arms closer. Her mother died in childbirth. She was the daughter of a local innkeep in Celoris. She left her home to come with me when the second sons and I passed through the city. Now the puzzle pieces started to visibly fall in their place in his mother's mind. You brought back an Isozi bastard." She almost spit out. Rukun's face immediately turned hard. "I brought back my daughter. She has no one else in this world except for me. Besides, I would prefer it if we don't hold this conversation in front of her. She understands more than you think." "I don't care what you think," his mother screamed for half the harbor to hear. "You run off to Essos one day to tour Bravos and Pentos. Suddenly, we get word that you are traveling from Myr to Volantis overland through the disputed lands. Instead of going home as you should, you let us know that you are traveling to Norphos and Qohor over the Rowan. Do you return after that? No. You then join a damn sellsword company as if you are nothing more than a common alleyway cutthroat. Now you bring back a bastard. This is too much, Rukun, even for you." Then his old mother did something that he had never seen before. She started crying in public. She wiped it away with the sleeve of her beautiful blue woolen dress, before turning around and walking away from her family. Shagidog passed her, as he quickly took back his place next to Rukun. You could see the anger, shock and hurt on his little brother's face over their mother's words. These emotions were reflected in Shaggy and the direwolf started growling lowly. Grey walked up to them and barked sharply at Shaggy, the two direwolves that had just been playing now squaring off against each other. "Don't make me send her away, Rob. I won't do it. If you send her away, I will go too. I will never set foot in the north again. Don't make me do this," his brother pleaded. It was clear that he was desperate, but his body language told them that he was serious. The way that he protectively held this little girl and how Shaggy was feeling threatened, it was clear that he loved his daughter. He inhaled and exhaled slowly, as all eyes turned towards him. He looked at the mop of brown hair that had drilled itself into Rukun's tunic. He turned back to his brother's blue eyes, who looked at him with both determination and fear. "Valor, is it?" he asked. Rukun nodded. It is the only thing that her mother could ever give her. I couldn't bring myself to change it. Valus, no, he tasted the name in his mouth. Unusual, but it will work. His little brother looked at him in confusion, until his eyes turned wide. You mean that we can stay?" He simply nodded. Rukun burst into a face-wide grin. "I thought with mother and everything. No kin of mine will be banished from my kingdom, especially not because of who her mother was or who she wasn't," he replied, a finality in his voice that he often used when making rulings. He meant it. She may be a bastard, but she was still Rukun's. Starks had had bastards before, and they would so again. She was part of the pack whether his mother wanted it or not. He would not abandon her or his brother to become lone wolves and die alone. You could see a weight dropping from his brother's shoulders, as he came forward to him and his siblings. He put his arm around him carefully, not to crush his young daughter. In his ear he whispered, "Thank you, brother. I owe you." Like nothing happened, he similarly hugged Bran and Jon and kissed Alis' hand, before turning to the children. His son had already forgotten the drama and went straight to the questioning. "Uncle Rukun, will you tell me about Essos? Have you seen snakes? Did you really fight battles with the Sellsword Company? Are there still dragons in Valyria? Did Shaggy miss me?" Rukun laughed loudly. Yes, no and yes," he replied, as he ruffled the boy's head, who smiled up at him with excitement about the fact that somebody could finally answer his questions about the other side of the world. He crouched down towards Margaret. "Do you remember me?" he asked her, and she nodded shyly. "Good, because I only have gifts for little princesses that remember their uncles." Rukun winked and she smiled back widely. "I'll give it to you tonight, good." She nodded enthusiastically. Then he continued on to Jon's children. He took a step back. "Is that you, Wenda? You have grown into a beautiful young woman. Where is your older sister?" Jon's daughter smiled. It's me, uncle. Lyanna is with her husband and son in Torrens Square." Rukun scratched his beard. That makes sense. I'll just have to visit her myself then. Maybe, you can join me. If your moody father allows it." Their youngest sibling looked towards Jon with a cheeky grin, who just sighed at his antics. All Jon's children laughed loudly. "We leave within the month." Rukun winked at Wenda, who smiled back broadly. Next up were Jon's sons Edric and Benjen. He told them how much stronger they looked than before he had left. He also promised both gifts and to tell them about all his battles and adventures. When he had made his rounds, Rukun looked back at all of them. "Now it is time you reacquaint yourself with my companions, I guess. I have a member of the King's Guard who is dying to see his king again." He joked, but he simply cocked his eyebrow at him. "What?" his brother asked. A collective sigh from the family was his deserved response. "We want to see the baby." His 7-year-old daughter screamed what they were all thinking. "Oh, well, that is normal, I guess." Rukun pulled the girl out of his tunic, which she didn't let go of easily. He placed her in front of him on the ground, but she immediately clung to his leg, softly whining. Shaggy walked in front of her and started licking her forehead, which seemed to calm the young girl. "She is a little shy." Rukun shrugged. "She doesn't get that from me." He grinned awkwardly, which elicited real laughter from his siblings. "Oh, that much we know, brother," Bran quipped, which made them all laugh even louder. "Valor, look to your father," Rukun softly said, as he squatted down to his daughter. She looked at him intently. "These people are family. They are the people I tell you stories about before you go to sleep. You know that I told you that there are more direwolves and that they are pack." The little girl nodded towards him. "That are those wolves," Rukun explained, as he pointed towards Grey Wind, Ghost and the others. The little girl turned around and cocked her head. "Wolf." Wolf, very good. Do you want to look at the other wolves?" he asked his daughter. You her, she nodded affirmatively. He picked the little girl's hand, and she waggled over towards him, flanked on one side by an overprotective direwolf and on the other by an overprotective father. She stopped in front of Grey and had to look up towards him to look into his eyes. Grey answered her stare intensely. Ouch. She asked Rukun. You can touch, Valor. She waggled closer to the direwolf on her own. Suddenly, Rukun looked towards him in shock. She can she? He nodded. Grey won't hurt her. His companion bowed down and with her tiny hand she petted his belly, while he sniffed her. He heard his direwolf's thoughts in his mind. Smells a bit different, but still pack. He almost had to grin about the blunt honesty in which his companion summarized the truth in his head. After meeting all the wolves and the whole family, Rukun picked her up again. Bran and Jon talked with their brother's companions, as the other members of the Wolf's Guard reacquainted themselves with Barkley. Rukun had picked up Valor and put her on his shoulders. Margaret had become jealous, so he had picked her up as well. Together they walked down the pier, back to the shore. Hundreds of people were staring at them. Apparently, a king and a prince carrying their daughters on their shoulders whilst both being flanked by 8-feet-tall adult direwolves. He was vaguely aware that his daughter was playing with the crown on his head, but he didn't care. You have a lot to explain, brother. He chuckled. Rukun sighed. I know, Rob. Little John's direwolf has grown massively and Margaret's pup is new. He voiced, after a while. Grey and Mather had a new litter. He responded. His son Ricard had named the female companion of his direwolf. It meant mother in the old tongue. He thought it apt seeing that she was the mother of his children's wolves. Summer and Aintur, which meant aunt in the old tongue, have gotten another litter as well. Bran's daughters now have direwolves too. He saw the glint in his brother's eyes and had to shut that down immediately. No, Rukun, she isn't getting a direwolf. I will accept her into the family. I will accept her into Winterfell. I will give her a room in the family wing. I will get her an education worthy of a Stark's daughter. I will even arrange a good noble marriage for her and take care of her dowry if you want me to, but she won't be getting a direwolf. You know the laws that I have made on the subject. I will not deviate from that. His brother looked at him, and they locked eyes until he finally relented. I know. Only people with the name Stark get a wolf, otherwise all families will simply intermarry us until they acquire their own. Still her father's name is Stark, that should count for something. He complained. Valor won't get a wolf. Margaret asked above him. He looked up towards her. No, she won't. However, you can let her play with yours. Maybe she would like that. He told his daughter. His little girl just nodded happily in response. In her mind they were already playing together. Oh, and about that dowry, I don't think that will be necessary. His brother told him. He simply raised his eyebrow. We made quite a bit of coin on our journey through Essos. Edric Castle had the idea of buying small amounts of trade wares in Pentos when we traveled to Myr. We sold them later for profit. We have all been doing that every time we traveled the past 3 years. Besides that, we made good coin serving in the Second Sons and gained our fair share of loot too. We all have our own chest of gold and silver that we have brought back north. He let that information sink in. That's smart of all of you. Their families will be happy. All of those that see their members return, that is. Rukun just looked into the distance, his face hardening and his eyes filling with sorrow. His brother had originally left with a ship filled with 50 guards, a king's guard and 21 noble companions from all over the north. He had sent back all guards that wished to go home when he left Myr, only 8 had chosen to stay with him on his journey. Denise Dustin and Artos Locke had also gone home then, but the other nobles had chosen to stay. Of his 28 companions, 11 had died. 3 of them had been guards, 8 had been nobles. Amongst them had been cousins to Lords Riswell, Blackwood, Locke and Flint of Flint's Finger, 2 clansmen of different clans, the 4th son of Lord Woolfield and the younger brother of Lord Lake. He put a hand on his brother's back. I know what it is to lose friends and war companions and to be the one they look to when things get difficult. I will not judge you for the choices you have made and the consequences they had. Rukun smiled sadly at him. Thank you for that, brother. I do have a few requests to make. He asked him, whilst they walked towards the horses that were waiting for them at the harbour together with the Mandaelis. Name them. The 8 guards that remained for me. They didn't have to do so. They risked their lives for me daily. The 3 that died had become friends by the time they passed. I want you to find out where their families live. I want to visit them, and I want them taken care of. Rukan began. He thought that over quickly. Most of these men would have joined because of the opportunity to see the world or the hope of gaining riches. Nonetheless, it could inspire loyalty in the area he ruled for only a very small price to pay. It shall be done. He answered. His brother smiled at that. The other 5. I want them raised to nobility and I want lands to be given to them. He frowned at that. Brother, I can't simply bestow lands to all commoners who serve well and whom we bond with. Why not? You and Uncle Edmure gave a hedge knight a lordship for saving his life during the war. All 5 of them saved mine, multiple times. He was countered. He thought it over. I can't give them lands, but I will investigate the possibility of having them raised into landless nobility. Maybe they can be knighted or something. I will also offer them service in either Winterfell or Moat Caelin's household for fair compensation if they wish it. That'll have to do, I suppose. Rukan replied. Lastly, I want you to organize a meeting for me with Lord Mandaeli. Organize a meeting. Rukan, you are a prince of House Stark. I don't have to arrange meetings for you. All doors open when you say your name even without my assistance. He responded confused. I know that, but your help will be appreciated for what I am about to ask him. He signaled for him to continue. I want a ship to be built for me, a trading cog. Not part of the Mandaeli fleet, but for me alone, and I want to find a ship captain to steer it. I made a lot of contacts in some of the free cities and maybe I'll want to go back there someday. Until then, it could give me some coin to spend and pass on to Valor and possible other siblings of her one day. Something that is mine, not simply from Winterfell's coffers. I can pay for it to be built from the coin that I made on my travels. Trade could pay for the crew and maintenance. Siblings. Are you finally considering marriage? He asked. Not now, but maybe someday I will. He nodded appreciatively. Well, come to me when you feel that you are ready. I will ask for a talk with Lord Mandaeli tomorrow. I will stand as guarantor for the build, that way he won't be able to refuse you. However, it might be better to wait for spring. Seas will be dangerous during winter for a new captain and crew to cross the narrow sea. Rukan looked pensively at that. I will be remaining home the next few years anyway. I can wait until spring. We will just need to implore Lord Mandaeli to have it finished by early spring. He laughed. That won't be a problem. He put his arm around his brother's shoulder, as Valor and Margaret smiled silently at each other. It is good to have you back, brother. I am glad that you will be staying home. I will still be traveling around the kingdom. I must show Valor the wall and the neck and everything in between. However, I will be staying in the north for the next years. She already lost her mother. She deserves to have a father. Chapter 81, A Fish Drowns. 23f. Rickard Stark. He woke up in bed next to the naked body of his wife. The weak autumn sun shone through a gap in the curtains on the wall in front of him. The light was dim, and he guessed that it was still very early in the morning. He looked over to the sleeping figure next to him. Alera was sleeping on her stomach, her body rhythmically rising and falling with every breath. He didn't love her, but he respected her and they liked each other well enough. Their marriage had been a political one, as most marriages in the nobility were. Still, they had grown closer lately since the birth of the twins. He loved his newborn children and was forever grateful to her for their existence. He grinned silently, as he knew she quickly wanted more children. He could wait a bit, but he would welcome them anyway. He looked over her tall naked figure. Many men were put off by her length, but he wasn't. He was taller still and her legs were something many a man would happily die for. He chuckled at the memory of the night before. She had wanted him, and she had gotten her wish. Nothing stroked his ego more, and it had temporarily brought him the peace of mind that he had been craving during the last few days. He slowly stood up, careful not to wake her. He walked to the adjacent room and splashed some water in his face from the bowl that stood there ready for just that purpose. He stretched his tall body out and looked at himself in the reflection of the water. His father often joked that he looked much more like a northerner than he himself had ever done. It was true that he looked fiercer than his father lately, but his father seemed to be the biggest supporter of the change. He looked at his brown hair in the reflection. As a child, it had had a reddish tint, but that had disappeared over the years. He had grey eyes, even greyer than his mother's. His grandmother always told him that they were his grandfather's eyes, stark eyes. His long face resembled both his mother and grandfather too. His height was all castock, having already surpassed his father 2 years ago. Nevertheless, he still resembled his father too. He was of a broader build than his castock uncles, combining his father's broad shoulders with their height. Many of his facial expressions and mannerisms were also said to be almost exact replicas of his father's. However, the most resembling trait he had of his father was his red beard. As much as the hair upon his head had darkened, the hairs on his chin and lip had remained bright red. He kept his beard in the cleaner version of the northern style, just like his father, and many remarked upon their resemblance every day. Hopefully, it would help him to demand the respect of their subjects today. He quickly washed his limbs and torso with a wet cloth and put on a dark grey tunic, lined with grey wolf fur. His trousers were blackish grey, and his crown was bronze and iron like his father's. His father had had it commissioned for his 16th birthday. "You are a man now, but more than that, you are also the adult crown prince of the kingdom. From now on, you will look the part too." It was smaller and less commanding than his father's, but unmistakably similar. He walked out of his room and closed the thick wooden door as silently as he could, without waking his wife. Sir Jeremy Biglestone stood guard in front of his room, and he greeted the knight. After a few words of small talk, the Riverlander fell in line next to him as they walked towards the nursery. As he walked in, he saw that his sister was already there. "Good morning, Edda." He smiled, before she saw him. She turned around and smiled as well. "Good morning, Rookie." In the corner, he saw the figure of Denai's Northguard silently standing guard. The loyal Northman had been born and raised in Wintertown, the only low-born soldier to be a part of the Wolf's Guard. Now, he was guarding the nursery on his orders. His sister held her second son on her lap, whilst her eldest boy was playing at her feet. Her youngest son and daughter were in their cribs next to her. 2 more cribs could be found in the room. He happily walked over to the large one. Inside, he found his 2 small children looking up at him. They were only 4 months old, yet they already were the family's pride and joy. "How are they?" he asked his older sister. "Well, Linnera has cried a few times, but the direwolves easily placated her. Edwile has remained silent. They have both been fed not an hour ago. They refuse to sleep, but they remain quiet," she responded. He picked up both his children, Edwile on his right arm and Linnera on his left. Both looked very interested and happy at the development. Edwile pushing his small hand into his beard as he tried to pull at the hairs. Linnera tucked herself away in his arm, whilst taking in the room around them with boundless curiosity. He walked over to his sister and sat next to her. On their way, they passed the only other crib, which was empty. His uncle had taken his bastard cousin Valor with him on his trip. He smiled to her eldest son Galbart Glover, and the 6-year-old boy happily smiled back. "Uncle!" his second nephew called out happily from his mother's lap. "Hello there, little nephew. Did you sleep well?" The boy nodded happily. They sat and talked like that for almost half an hour, before he again had to put his children down in the crib. Their mother would soon come to pick them up together with her ladies. He had to start the rest of his day. He walked into the great hall to get his breakfast. He ordered sausages, bacon, bread and jam to start his day, together with some watered-down ale. He had a long day ahead of him, and he would need a hefty breakfast. In the great hall, many of his household and council were present and pleasantries were exchanged. His direwolf Ash seemed happy, as he was given generous amounts of bacon and sausages under the table. He looked upon the color of his companion's fur, and mentally patted himself on the back for his name once more. His brother-in-law, Goran Glover, arrived a few minutes later and joined him at his table. They talked about their families together, until he left the older Glover heir to go to his father's solo with his trusted guard Sir Deacon Brune. The knight from Cracklaw Point had served him for over 15 years and had become a trusted advisor of him, as well as his loyal protector. On his way, he passed by the Hand Solar, and he saw that his uncle Harry was already there. The Lord of Carhold smiled at him and slightly bowed his head, but he waved it away. "What are we looking at today?" he asked his uncle. "2 farm disputes, a rapist and a thief for now, but more could turn up." The answer came, as the hand of the king handed him a small stack of papers. He nodded meaningfully. The last 2 would be easy enough to deal with, but the farm disputes would require more finesse. It was his job to hold court this week, now that his father was away. 2 months ago, they had returned from Seaguard from his sister's wedding to Sir Geoffrey Mallister. It had been a beautiful wedding, although he disliked the setting in a September. His own wedding to Alara had been in front of the Weirwood in Winterfell, and to him that was a much more mystical and divine setting. He had known Sir Geoffrey for years, and he was a good friend of his. His cousin, Hoster Tully, had been raised in Winterfell for years when they were younger together with the future heirs to houses Marndale, Umber, Carstark, Flint and Ryswell. Some Riverlander nobles had been disgruntled that the heir to Riverrun would grow up in a fully northern setting, which is why they were joined by Geoffrey Mallister and Titos Blackwood after a year. They had become close friends throughout his childhood and many marital bonds had come from their friendships. His own wife was the sister of his friend Osric, whilst his cousin Lysara Carstark had married Titos Blackwood. Osric himself had married Robin Ryswell, his friend Mark's sister. Now his own sister had married Geoffrey Mallister in a dual wedding where Geoffrey's sister also married his cousin Hoster Tully. His father had encouraged many of these marriages, to strengthen his own position later. Best to be good friends with much of the north, he always told him. During the latest winter, Goran Glover had been the newest addition to his inner circle. Lately, his younger brother had found himself his own friend group as well together with their cousins Baltasar Bolton, Edric Whitefee and Meager Sawin. His 12-year-old brother John had left Winterfell together with his father and would continue afterwards his journey to Sea Dragon Point with their uncle John. He would be fostered there for the next 4 years, together with their Whitefee cousins and the heir to House Mormont. 3 weeks ago, his father had received a message about a large dispute between 3 clan chiefs in the mountains. He and his uncle John had quickly left to deal with it, taking his younger brother with them in the process. His father hadn't visited the clans yet during his reign and would use this opportunity to rectify this just before winter arrived. He also wanted to check on the roads that had partly been built in that direction this summer. Summer had been far shorter than they had hoped, which resulted in the roads not being finished yet. They would have to restart their activities in spring. This would cost a lot more, but nothing could be done about it. His father also wanted to ask the clans about their stores for winter. Traditionally, many moved south to pass the winter in Wintertown, and that could already be seen by the doubling of Wintertown's population. Due to these influxes, it had temporarily passed Barrowtons with some 40,000 people lived in the town now, although over half would leave again by spring. His father wanted to send more food transports to the mountains and would use his journey to assess which clans needed help the most. This all left him in charge of Winterfell as the heir. He would have to speak law for the people and deal with the immediate problems of the kingdom. His father had joked that it was good practice, and it was the second time he had to do this for a longer time now. The first had been over half a year ago when his uncle Rukan had arrived back from Essos. His uncle had completely changed from what he remembered and was now a father. His own father had made him an advisor on the council almost immediately after his arrival. Uncle Rukan was loved by most of the family, especially his nephews and nieces. In contrast, the relationship between him and grandmother remained strained, but it was improving slightly over time. His uncle was expected to return from Torrens Square today, as he had visited Uncle John's daughter Lyanna and her husband and son there together with John's other daughter Wenda. She had wanted to see her sister again before her upcoming marriage with Bim Flint, Lord Timothy's eldest son, and Uncle Rukan had offered to accompany her. He shook the thoughts out of his mind and walked on towards his father's solar, which he had been allowed to make his own for the duration of his absence. He sat down upon the main chair and looked over the documents his Uncle Harry had given him. He looked them over and prepared for the farm disputes, until his uncle suddenly walked in with a scroll in his hand. Maester John O stood silently behind him. "News from Riverrun, it is bad." The Lord of Carhold spoke. Without another word he took the raven scroll from his hand. It was written in his cousin Hoster's handwriting. "With sadness I announce that my father, Lord Edmure Tully, has died after a fall of his horse during a hunt. I request the Crown's aid in ensuring a smooth transition of power in the Riverlands and my recognition as my father's heir. Hoster Tully, Lord of Riverrun and Harrenhal, Paramount of the Riverlands." He looked at the letter in shock. His great-uncle Edmure had died. Lord Edmure had ruled the Riverlands well the past 2 decades. With the aid of his father, Houses Stark and Tully had been relatively successful in pacifying and uniting the famously divided Riverlanders these past years. Without him, problems could arrive. The timing of it all couldn't be worse, just before winter. If problems broke out due to the succession, the North wouldn't be able to respond quickly enough. Gathering the armies of the North was an endeavor that took around 6 to 10 weeks in summer. In winter, this could easily double. Nonetheless, the biggest problem would be supply. They would partially have to use food that was set aside to feed the small folk, which could create a disaster if they had to face a long winter. He looked into the eyes of his Karstark uncle. "Suspend holding court and call my father's council. I want them all in the council room in an hour. We must take immediate action and prepare for all different scenarios. My father can then ultimately decide on what to do, but we need to act now." The head of House Karstark looked at him in thought, before silently nodding and walking away. When he was alone, he placed his head in his hands. Of all the times that this could happen, why now? He and his father had been in the Riverlands 3 months ago. They had seen Uncle Edmure there and he had been in good health. If something would have happened there, father could have acted. Now it fell to him. He picked up the scroll and walked out of the solar. Sir Daikon immediately falling in behind him. He strode up to the rooms of his grandmother, knocking at the door politely after the guards let him pass. To his surprise, it was not his grandmother, but his sister Birina who opened the door. She had a weird bun in her hair. It looked delicate and was definitely not northern. She saw the look of surprise on his face and immediately explained herself. "Grandmother is teaching me old hair and dress styles from the Vale. She says that I will be much easier accepted by the local nobility and peasantry if I dress and look like them." He mulled that over in his head for a second, before concluding that it wasn't a half-bad idea. "That is a good idea, sister, although I can't imagine anyone that wouldn't accept you for who you are." His younger sister smiled at that. "However, I have urgent news for grandmother. You can stay, if you like. It concerns a family matter. Nonetheless, your lessons will need to be postponed." "What happened?" Birina asked. "Where is grandmother?" He simply replied. "Birina, sweetheart, what is happening at the door? Your hair is coming undone like that." He heard Lady Caitlin Tully call out loudly. He softly pushed beyond his sister into the room. "Grandmother, we need to talk. Something has happened in the Riverlands." The old matriarch of the family looked up in shock. She saw the severity on his face. "Has war broken out? Has the Reach invaded?" she asked, her eyes turning wide. He shook his head. "No, but I got word from Hoster. Something has happened to Uncle Edmure," he responded solemnly, as he closed the distance between them. She immediately jumped up and accepted the raven scroll into her hands. Her eyes scanned the parchment quickly, as her face turned pale. She simply nodded, as she handed the scroll back to him. A small tear started forming in the side of her eye, but she wiped it off quickly. "Thank you for bringing me the news in person. I imagine that you have a lot of work to do," she said, her voice almost breaking. Birina came behind him. "Rookie, what is this? What has happened?" He silently handed her the paper, as he kept his eyes on his grandmother. He pulled her into a hug, as her tears started to flow more freely. "He was my little brother. After the death of our mother, I had to raise him. He always loved me. I had already lost father and Lysa, and Uncle Bryndon is fading. Soon I will be the last of the Tullys of my childhood. She voiced softly. He hugged her more tightly. Hoster is a great man. He will honor your brother and father greatly. The Tullys of Riverrun are stronger than ever, and it is partially by your marriage and your care for my father and Hoster that they will be so strong. He tried to reassure her. She pulled back a little and smiled sadly at him. You sound just like your late grandfather. He would also try to reassure me with kind words and a hug when I felt miserable. He tried to smile back but didn't know how to respond to that. I understand that the news may be overwhelming, but I would ask for your counsel. After Sara's wedding, most of the Riverlanders on the council used the fact that they were already in Seaguard to visit their families and prepare their own lands for winter. None of them are present, and the only Riverlanders that I have available for advice are you, Uncle Bryndon, Hoster Blackwood and some Kingsguard members. His grandmother wiped off another tear but nodded affirmatively. When would you need it? We will gather in the council chamber in half an hour. He replied. Let me change and make myself presentable. Afterwards, I will come. Thank you, grandmother. I appreciate it greatly. He responded honestly, and she just gave him another sad smile. He turned around and saw Birina looking at him. What are you going to do? I am going to rule in father's absence. His last known location was Breakstone Hill. I will go to the Maester now to send the information on, but by the time a raven reaches it and flies back, days will have passed. That is if we assume that he is still there, which he probably isn't. We can't wait that long to send our condolences and support to House Tully. Hoster needs House Stark's support as soon as he can to consolidate the Riverlands as best as he can before winter. She looked at him and nodded. Will Mother join you in the council? She asked. I hope so. He answered. Then I will go with you to the Maester and afterwards to Mother. Margaret is with her, and you know how she gets if she is without family since Sara's wedding, especially now that father is away. I will take care of our little sister, whilst Mother helps you with governing. Thank you, Rena. That means a lot. He replied honestly. They said another goodbye to their grandmother and left her chambers together. They climbed the stairs until they reached the Maester's turret. A few minutes later, Maester John O's had copied the letter and sent it on to Breakstone Hill. He also sent it to 3 more mountain clans that would be on his father's route to ensure that he got the message. They left Maester John O's to gather as much information about the Riverlands as he could, before leaving to find Mother. After asking a few people from the household, they found her in the Godswood together with Sir Edmund Grey. Usually, their uncle Torrin protected her, but he had travelled with their father. Their mother was playing with their younger sister's hair, as she hummed a song. He knew the song. It was an old lullaby native to Carhold, which his mother and uncles had taught him to sing when he was younger. The Queen smiled at her 2 children, but seemed to understand immediately that something was wrong. What is it, Rookie? Word has come from Riverrun. Uncle Edmure has died. Hoster asks for our aid. He has already claimed the title of Warden and the lordship of both Riverrun and Harrenhal. The Queen's eyes went white. He will of course be named Warden. The lordship of Riverrun is his too, but Harrenhal is supposed to go to his younger brother. And the relationship between both brothers is already strained. I need your help. He pleaded. She immediately got up and dusted the leaves of her dress. Have you called the council? He nodded. They will be assembling in a few minutes. Very good, I will join you immediately. She answered, as she rushed over to him. Shouldn't you wash up first? Birina asked her. Their mother scoffed. I know that your grandmother has been teaching you about the south, Rena, and it will do you good. However, never forget that this is the north. I am their queen, and these men will have to listen to me whether I am in gown or a mudded dress. Decorum and chivalry are pleasant and useful, but not important in a time of crisis. His sister nodded, her cheeks glowing red for the chastisement. I will take care of Margaret, mother. Thank you, my daughter. Their mother smiled at her. She walked over and placed a small kiss on the crown of her head, which visibly seemed to please Birina. Sir Edmund, will you guard my daughters? She asked her protector. Of course, your grace. It is my pleasure to guard the princesses. The knight acknowledged with a slight bow, which made Margaret giggle. Together they strode out of the godswood. They walked towards the first keep and climbed up the stairs. When they walked into the council room, everybody was already there. To his surprise, his uncle Rukan was there as well. He was still in his riding coat and his boots and trousers were muddied, possibly beyond repair. "Welcome back, uncle." He greeted him. Ash happily greeted Shagidog and took place next to him in front of the raging fireplace. "Thank you, nephew. I arrived just 10 minutes ago, and I ran into the hand of the king. I hope you will forgive me my attire." Uncle Rukan grinned, as he gave a sideways look towards his mother. He waved the concern away. "I need your brain and its advice. I couldn't care less about your attire." His uncle grinned a very wide smile directed at Lady Caitlin. Out of habit, he walked to the seat of the heir close to him and prepared to sit down, but his uncle Harry coughed. "Prince Ricard, your father has left you in charge of Winterfell and given you the authority to act on his behalf. I would suggest that you take his seat so you can effectively take charge of the meeting," he suggested. His uncle saw his hesitation and continued. "Maybe the Queen could take your seat instead. To signify her importance perhaps." He looked over to his mother and she nodded encouragingly. "Very well, Lord Hand," he replied. He pulled out the heir's chair for his mother, who graciously sat down. Afterwards he walked over to his father's throne. He caressed one of the direwolf armrests, before taking his place. He looked upon the faces that had been gathered today. The council was less than complete, but he could still count on some important figures. 3 of his uncles were present. Lord Harry Carstark, the Hand of the King, sat to his right. His uncle Rukan sat a bit further on the same side. Next to him sat Lord Cleesewin, the husband of his Aunt Arya. His mother's cousin and the Master of the Treasury, Osric Carstark, sat next to the Hand. Next to him sat the Master of Whisperers Berthon. In front of him sat Lord Willis Marndaly, the Master of Ships. To his own left sat his old great-great-uncle Sir Brynden Tully, in the capacity of Lord Commander of the Wolfsguard and as representative of the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Maester Jon sat next to Lord Marndaly and next to him sat the newest member of the council Hoster Blackwood. Lord Hornwood sat next to the Riverlander. His mother and grandmother completed the room. "First of all, I would ask if any of you have any problem with me bringing Sir Dickon Brune of the Wolfsguard into the council. He would take the seat of his uncle Lord Rupert Brune for the time being as our voice from Cracklaw Point." He looked around the room for a response. He knew he could very well bring in anyone that he liked, as he had done with his grandmother, but it would still be beneficial to be in the council's good graces. As no one objected, he motioned for his trusted protector to come into the room and take a seat. He looked around the room at all the familiar faces. "We have received grave news today. Lord Edmure Tully, the Paramount of the Riverlands, has died. The Lord Paramountcy of the Riverlands is the most important title in the kingdom aside from those of the Crown. He was a well-liked figure in his sometimes troublesome homeland, and we must assess if any problems are expected to arise due to his passing." He began the emergency meeting. Maester Jon spoke up first. "In your and the Queen's absence, I have read aloud the Raven Scroll that Sir Hoster Tully has sent. I hope you find this agreeable." He waved away the formality. "Thank you, Jon that saves all of us some time. Any remarks?" He continued upon that information. "Well, first of all we need to look at the situation of House Tully." Lady Caitlin spoke up, before looking at him for confirmation to speak further. He motioned for her to do so. "My brother Edmure left 3 sons and 2 daughters. The eldest son, Hoster, has recently married into House Mallister with his marriage to Lord Jason Mallister's granddaughter. His eldest daughter, Minissa, married Sir Rob Peage, the heir to Fairmarket. The other 3, Oscar, Celia and Elmar, are neither married nor betrothed." She described the situation. "Oscar Tully has long squired for his grandfather Lord John Bracken. He has recently started squiring for his uncle Sir Henry Bracken, who as you all know has resigned from the council a few months ago for this exact purpose. Celia Tully remains with her brother Hoster in Riverrun, while the youngest son Elmar is being fostered at Pink Maiden with House Piper. Most at the table knew this already, but now came the interesting information. The relationships between the children, and especially the boys, is very strained. My brother often wrote to me for help, as his heir Hoster couldn't see eye to eye with any of his brothers. Problems between the sons are to be expected, especially with Hoster now laying claim to his brother's title. His brother's title? Sir Deacon Brune asked. My nephew signed an agreement with the king that his second son should be given Harrenhal at the latest on his 20th birthday. The king never wanted Harrenhal and Riverrun to be ruled by one man together. The problem is that my nephew never got the chance to hand it to Oscar. Now due to his death, Hoster as the oldest inherits everything, at least in theory. This scroll shows us that he intends to do just that and that he claims his brother's intended inheritance. His great-granduncle explained. Many of the men present scratched their beards. Are the relations between both brothers really that bad? Lord Willis asked. Hoster Blackwood scoffed. Everybody in the Riverlands has heard about their numerous fights. Many stories go around about them. They even say that Oscar and Elmar once tried to convince their father to disinherit Hoster because he was a bad Riverlander. It is said that young Hoster had to be restrained from charging them with a dagger when he heard. He sighed. He knew the story, or a version of it at least. Hoster was a good friend of his and had written to him about his brother's attempts to undermine his position. In all his letters, he had always promised his support to his cousin against possible aggressions by his brothers in the future. It was clear that his cousin was now trying to take him up on that. It was probably known that his father was away. This message was sent for him. What were their reasons for calling him a bad Riverlander? I have seen the boy throughout the years. He seemed relatively promising. Good with a sword, intelligent in conversation, just. The only arguably bad thing that I could mention from his time in Winterfell is a vindictive streak that I could recall from 1 or 2 occasions. Lord Roderick Dustin asked. His grandmother shuffled on her chair. My brother wrote to me that his youngest sons disapprove of his lack of piety and a knighthood. They also reproach his choice of friends, as many aren't from the Riverlands. This led to great commotion among the council. Lords Carstark and Marndaly were furious, whilst Lord Dustin looked appalled. His choice of friends. My grandson, and heir, is one of those friends. Lord Willis shouted, a thing that he didn't often do. As is my son and heir. Lord Harryon growled. Although I sympathize with both your feelings, my lords, I think you forget the greatest insult of all. His uncle Rickon spoke up in a calm, but firm tone. This got him the attention of most at the table. One of my cousin Hoster's best friends sits over there in that chair. Uncle Rickon voiced, as he lazily pointed his finger at him. This got the whole room agitated once more. Prince Rickon is right. Those boys not only insult House Tully's heir, but the Crown Prince himself with their comments. Lord Harley's Hornwood spoke up. Next to him, Uncle Brynden sighed and buried his head in his hands. At the same time, his grandmother came to her nephew's defense. My lords, these comments were made when both were mere boys. They still are underage years later. I will not defend their words against my own grandson, but keep in mind that these things were likely said in the heat of an argument between brothers. None of them would ever have the intention of insulting Prince Ricard. He watched the interactions. His father had taught him to let things play out first, before speaking his mind. They may not have intended to do so, Lady Catelyn, but that doesn't mean that they didn't. His mother spoke up against his grandmother. He looked over to the Blackfish. He was here to represent House Tully. What would you propose, Uncle Brynden? Surprised to be singled out, he looked at him for a moment. It's not an easy situation. First, Hoster would need to be confirmed as Lord of Riverrun and Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Hopefully, this pacifies some of his fears. I tutored Edmure's oldest son for years here in Winterfell, and the boy wrote to me after the incident happened. All members of the council now looked at the Blackfish. He was afraid that his inheritance would be unjustly stolen from him. On top of that, he also showed signs of, what Lord Dustin so aptly called, a vindictive streak. Him laying claim to Harrenhal, Oscar's birthright, is his revenge for Oscar trying the same with Riverrun 2 years ago. He nodded at that. Hoster never forgot a slight. He would not miss an opportunity to get back at Oscar for what he had tried. Now, my nephew tried to pacify the boys by keeping the boys apart. After the incident, Oscar returned to Stonehenge to foster with his grandfather, whilst Elmar was sent to Pink Maiden to foster and repair relations with House Piper. With Hoster back home, Edmure could afford to send both boys away, and he hoped the distance would mend things in time. Apparently, this failed. However, the problems went deeper than that. His great-granduncle sighed. My late nephew's eldest daughter Minissa always supported her eldest brother, whilst his youngest daughter Celia supported the younger brothers. Even with Oscar and Elmar away, Celia often started fights with the two eldest. She often found excuses to visit her brother and Bracken cousins in Stonehenge, and Edmure, tired of her antics, allowed her too much freedom to do so. That is not fair, uncle. Minissa and Celia are both good girls, they just missed guidance. Edmure's responsibilities were vast, and he often travelled the Riverlands. It is his wife whom I blame. Lady Jane poisoned the minds of her youngest children against her elder ones. She spent far more with the youngest and very openly favoured them against Hoster and Minissa, which caused irreparable damage between the children. His grandmother called out. "Ha, a Bracken wife poisoning the minds of your family around you. Who would have thought?" Blackwood called out. He gave his advisor a stern look. "No use digging up old rivalries. Sir Bryndon is right. Past actions have made the inheritance of Riverrun doubtful. We need to take away that doubt and assure Hoster that House Stark is on his side. We need to publicly affirm him as the heir to Riverrun and name him Lord Paramount. Maester John O's write up the papers now." "Of course, Prince Ricard." The Maester replied dutifully. "What about Harrenhal?" Lord Hornwood asked. "We can't let it go to someone that insults the North, the Crown Prince, and tries to usurp his older brother. Lord Harleys, they are children." His grandmother exclaimed in shock. "No matter how hard I agree with Lord Hornwood's sentiments, I must remind you all that it was King Rob who decided that Riverrun and Harrenhal shouldn't be held by the same lord. He ruled that a side branch of House Tully should be established there." Osric Karstark pointed out. "By the time that he became 20, now the boy is only 15. Cleesewin pointed out. "My brother became king by the age of 15. Uncle Rickon countered, as he raised his eyebrow. This went back and forth a few more times before he spoke up. "I can't possibly overrule my father's earlier decisions. However, Oscar is too young to rule, he is not even of age. The Crown could appoint a regent until then." Lord Willis remarked. "Until when?" Hoster Blackwood asked. "Until he comes of age," his grandmother proposed. "That is within a few months, my lady. Wouldn't it be better to wait until he has received his spurs? That could be years from now. More than enough time for his grace to deal with the issue personally." Lord Marndale countered. Most seemed to agree with that statement, but not his mother. "No, he is squiring for his grandfather Lord John O's and his uncle Sir Henry Bracken. If we announce that Oscar gets full control over Harrenhal when he is knighted, they will knight him this afternoon." Lord Edmure's court was filled with Brackens at multiple points. "They will try the same in Harrenhal." The Blackfish agreed with that. Old Lord John O's would knight his grandson in a heartbeat, if it meant gaining influence over Harrenhal and its rich lands. "Very well," he surmised, "we appoint a regent until Oscar comes of age. Do you know when that would be?" "His name day is in 9 months. Edmure had celebrated it with him just before arriving in Seaguard for the wedding," his grandmother replied. He thanked her for the information with a kind smile. He didn't want her to get isolated, as she had more personal information about Uncle Edmure's younger children than anyone else. 9 months is quite a ways off. By that time, young Hoster will be settled in as lord in Riverrun, and his fear will hopefully have faded. His brother Oscar will be certain of his inheritance, and things might die out soon. They won't become the best of friends, but that might work." His uncle Harry thought aloud. "You are all forgetting one crucial thing," Uncle Rickon brought up. "And that is?" Multiple voices asked at once. "As Lord of Harrenhal, Oscar will have to pay homage to his brother," the elder Stark prince replied. This got a lot of sighs from the room. He might rebel from the thought alone. Hoster Blackwood rightfully remarked. The lordship of Harrenhal would give him the means to do so. Lord Hornwood added. What if we make it a condition? Lord Roderick Dustin asked. Oscar gets his lordship after reaching adulthood, but only if he pays homage to his brother and the king now. He mulled it over. He won't like it, but it will work. The Brackens won't allow him to throw away the riches Harrenhal brings. He agreed personally, which put the issue to rest foremost. Uncle Rickon didn't agree. This might work, nephew, but winter is coming. The next few years, Oscar will be plotting and scheming against his brother from the safety of his snow-covered fortress. This will plant the seeds for future strife in the Riverlands. Those lands have always been divided. The lords will have enough camps to choose from between two Tully brothers, the faith militant that is stirring trouble and a revanchist reach on the border. He had to acknowledge that it held some truth. What do you propose then, uncle? That Oscar gets nothing. We gift Hoster the lordship of Harrenhal, under the condition that he keeps investing coin into it. The crown appoints their own castellan to oversee things daily, whilst Hoster gets the nominal lordship. He could pass it to his second son in time. This could still fulfill my brother's vision. He proposed. Rickon. How dare you say such things? Oscar is as much your cousin as Hoster is. His grandmother scolded his uncle for everyone to hear. The Stark prince simply shrugged. Better than having a war. I'd much rather upset a cocky cousin of mine than that I would have to leave my daughter to go kill those who revolt against my brother or nephew in the future. An uneasy silence settled itself over the room, until Lord Selwyn countered the proposal. Harrenhal couldn't ever hope to stand up to Riverrun on its own, could it? It is still recovering from the war. You also need to keep in mind that Hoster has clear allies in region in the Mallisters and the Peages. The Blackwoods and Goodwoods would stand at Lord Hoster's side as well. Torrin Blackwood added resolutely. Aye, as will many others I suspect. However, Harrenhal would not stand alone. As a lord in his own right, Oscar would be free to marry and form an alliance without his elder brother's approval. He could also receive support from his mother's family and many of their friends and allies that he has come to know from his time at Stonehenge. Besides, if he slanders his elder brother as an old god's lover, many pious riverlords could lend their support too. His uncle opposed the view. He thought it all over, before speaking up. My uncle makes some valid points, although it is not enough to break my father's word over. Besides, it was also Lord Edmure's wish that Harrenhal would go to Oscar. Preventing that would be seen as tyrannical. Many in the room murmured their agreement. Nonetheless, it wouldn't to keep an extra watch on the situation. Berthan, if I give you access to the royal regent in Harrenhal for a few months, would it be possible for you to infiltrate some spies into the castle to keep an eye on things? He asked his father's spymaster. Certainly, my prince. He answered quickly. Ricard, are you truly going to order that man to spy on your cousin? His grandmother asked in shock. I will. It is better than to tyrannically strip him from his inheritance. His grandmother relented at that. I applaud that you will at least do something, Ricard, but I keep to my earlier point. Conflict will come of this. The Riverlands have always been easy to divide. Without the common enemy in the Lannisters, it has already proven more difficult each year for your father to keep the lords in check. This will give the discontent lords a cause to rally around. Rickon brought up for a last time. It might, uncle, but he may rally those lords around them even quicker when he is unjustly robbed of his birthright. It would give him a legitimate cause to rebel not only against his brother, but against House Stark as well. I will not create the possible grounds for a great rebellion in the Riverlands during winter without my father to back me up. He closed the conversation. His mother openly supporting his view. These measures could also give the crown more time to create lasting alliances in the Riverlands during winter. My daughter's marriage to House Mallister was no coincidence. As you all know, I have 2 more children which could yet be betrothed. On top of that, Prince Brandon has 3 children that will have need of a match. I will discuss the need for additional marriage alliances with the Riverlands with my husband and my brother-in-law. If we use this possibility this winter to better our position, we might very well intimidate them enough to the point that rebelling won't seem an option. Many murmured their agreement and he subtly nodded to his mother in thanks, before taking back control of the room. Immediately after this meeting, I will send the same message to Riverrun, Stonehenge, Fairmarket, Pink Maiden and Harrenhal. This will ensure that all my cousins will know the news at the same time. The crown can't be seen as picking favorites unfairly. Hoster will be affirmed as the Lord of Riverrun and the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Oscar will be given Harrenhal after swearing his oaths and reaching adulthood. Elmar will continue his fostering by Housepiper, as his father intended. He summarized, before taking a deep breath. I would also like to personally have lessons with you, Uncle Brynden, about the Riverlands. You are the most experienced man concerning the subject, both in the politics of the Riverlands and war and conflict in general. I would gladly indulge in that experience. He voiced, as he looked at his old great-granduncle. I am afraid that I won't survive this winter, young nephew, but I would be happy to be of service in any way until my ailing body decides it has enough of the biting cold that you call winter. He nodded in thanks. Sir Brynden, the Blackfish, was a legend in all the 7 kingdoms and had had a great part in his father's success. He wanted his wisdom to be a part of his as well. He looked around the room. I thank you all for your wise counsel. I declare this council meeting over. Maester John O's, if you would be so kind as to allow me to follow you towards the rookery, then we can send the letters together immediately. He finalized. It would be my honor, my prince. The Maester smiled. All council members stood up from their seats. Rookon whistled for Shaggy and the huge direwolf got up on his feet immediately. All others let him pass first, as the direwolf easily towered over any man there by more than a foot. Ash padded over happily towards him, and he scratched him behind his ear. His mother and Uncle Harry stayed behind for a little while. The hand of the king patted him on the back. You did very well, Ricard. You will make a fine king someday. His mother agreed. Your father would have been very proud of you, my son. I know that I already am. When one day fate strikes and your father is forced to leave us, the North will be safe in your hands. She lauded him. It brought a smile to his face, and he thanked both profusely. Afterwards, he walked out with the Maester, who took the opportunity to ask him about all sorts of products that would help him in his experiments. Chapter 82, A Mentor Passes. 26F. Bran. He had finally made it to Winterfell. Only a few had made the trip, as they were in the middle of winter. The King's Road had been snowed under and most of the fields were frozen over. The journey had been horribly difficult, but he, Alyn and their handful of companions had made it. He hadn't made the terrible journey for nothing. The death of his childhood hero had struck him hard, and he hadn't even contemplated staying in Moat Cailin with his family. His wife Bethany would rule Moat Cailin well enough until his return. He immediately felt warmer when he passed beneath the grey granite walls of his ancestral home. In the courtyard, he and his 6 companions were greeted by his nephew Ricard. The Crown Prince grabbed him in a hug once he got off his horse. Uncle Brandon, it is very good to see you. Summer sniffed at Ash, and soon the 2 direwolves were happily playing besides them. It is good to see you too, nephew. How is the rest of the family? How did they take the news? Ricard's face fell. Hard, uncle. I did as well. He had been mentoring me for the past 3 years, on top of the lessons he sometimes gave me during my childhood. 4 hours every week I had been spending with him without exception, ever since the news of Uncle Edmure's death came in. He nodded. How is my mother doing? She hasn't taken it well. For 2 weeks all she did was ramble about how he should be given a Tully funeral in a boat upon the Red Fork. This was crazy, of course. We couldn't transport the body to Riverrun even if we tried. Besides, Uncle Brynden himself had long since agreed that it would be impossible. This funeral was his idea. A small smile crept up in the corner of his nephew's mouth. His idea? He asked. It was. His nephew replied, before continuing in a decent impression of their late uncle. I have served you half my life, Rob. Why not serve you in death as well? Make a ceremony out of it for all future Wolfsguard or just for the commanders. I don't care either way. Just say some kind words about me when the time comes. I think I deserve that much." He smiled at the words, as they were very clearly his old mentors. He had always had an uncaring attitude around him, but all could see that he loved his family dearly. "How is your father doing?" he finally asked. Ricard went through his beard as he stared in front of him. "He seems to be hiding it well, but I believe he is distraught. He stays alone in his solar for longer than usual and has been taken more frequent trips to the Godswood." That's what I thought. Your father won't show any weakness, but Uncle Brynden was his biggest supporter throughout his reign. When the war first started, Robb planned to free our father with the help of Lord Carstark, who was like a second father to him. They were the mentors of his childhood. He told his nephew. However, our great-uncle soon proved his worth from the start. After both father and Lord Carstark were killed by the Lannisters, Robb started to put more and more trust on the Blackfish. By the time they got back to Winterfell, he had become his second most important war companion after Jon. During peacetime and for the protection of his family, our uncle quickly grew to be the most important one. Robb valued his advice highly, and he even told me that he would have lost certain battles were it not for his scouting or battle plans. The Crown Prince listened and nodded along with what he told me. I only realized this too late. 3 years ago, during the Tully debacle, I realized the importance of having a Riverlander mentor for the future of my reign. That is why I spent so much time with him since then. He was as gifted a teacher as he was a commander or knight. Ricard praised. He smiled and quickly agreed. That he was. Those few months that I spent under his guardianship in Riverrun before the war have been some of the best of my life if I look back at it. He gave up his position of Knight of the Gate to tutor me, I will never forget that. Both talked a little more, before heading towards the Great Hall. Inside, he found most of his family, although Robb was nowhere to be seen. He and his companions were quickly brought ale and a hot meal. He gobbled it down quickly, thankful for the warmth it brought his body. 11-year-old Margaret quickly ran over to him, together with her direwolf Dancer. Dancer and Summer jumped around, happy to see each other. Soon, half a dozen more direwolves joined in the ritual. "Uncle Bran!" His niece called out loudly, as she ran closer. He knew what she wanted, and he would oblige. He stood up from the bench and caught her as she jumped towards him. He twirled her around as she filled the great hall with laughter. After a little while, he put her back on the ground with a smile. "Isn't our niece getting a little too old for that, brother?" Arya asked strictly, but her eyes betrayed her approval. "This little girl? No, she is light as a feather. I could do this for years to come," he replied, as he winked to his little niece. She giggled loudly, exclaiming her approval at the idea of years of twirling around still to come. "It is good to see you, brother," Arya voiced, as she grabbed him in a hug. "Mother will be happy to see you. You always were her favorite. The gods know that she needs some happiness right now. I always thought her favorite was Sansa," he responded, while raising an eyebrow. Arya laughed. "No, she was way too perfect as a little girl. That got boring, even for our mother." Now both were laughing loudly, and soon the rest of the family had gathered around him to greet him, as Arya went on to greet Alyn. First came Arya's family. All of them had come to Winterfell to pay their respects. It helped that they were the closest house to it, but it still made a great show of support. Lord Clee came first, and they clasped arms amicably. Lord Sewin had been good to his sister throughout the years, and he was an enjoyable fellow to have around. Afterwards came his 17-year-old heir Meager. The boy had grown a lot since he had last seen him 2 years ago, both in size and width. His arms and shoulders had filled out, and his legs looked as strong as tree trunks. The boy was a friend of his son Brynden and seemed a reliable young man. He looked inside the boy's stark eyes that he had inherited from Arya, as they changed pleasantries. Behind Meager came his 2 younger brothers Edarion and Robard. The 12 and 10-year-old boys greeted him happily, quickly asking if he would show them some sword tricks the Blackfish had showed him in the past. Touched by the gesture, he quickly agreed. Behind them came Arya's only daughter Jonella. She walked up to him together with her Aunt Alice. He greeted his niece, before making a slight bow to his sister-in-law. "My queen." "Oh, bugger off, Bran. You have spent way too much time in the south for your own good. You know that I hate those fanciful titles and bows. I have to endure them by over half our subjects, I don't want to have to endure them from my brother-in-law as well." She scolded him. He laughed in response, and simply grabbed her in a hug. Behind her came her second son, Jon Stark. The boy was 15, the same age as his son Brynden. Both were as thick as thieves, a thing which brought joy to the whole family. "Has Brynden come with you?" his nephew immediately asked him, but he had to disappoint him. "No, Jon. Brynden still remains in the Riverlands with his mother's family. His time to foster is not yet over, but it will be over before you know it. In a few months, he will come north. I will make sure that he visits you immediately after seeing his mother," he replied. This seemed to disappoint the boy, although he clearly understood and eagerly accepted his proposal. Jon then went on to greet Alan Blackwood, who he knew well because of his time spent with Bryn. Rickon was next. He hugged his little brother warmly. "How is Moat Cailin, brother?" he was asked. "It is good. The population was well prepared for winter. They will pull through." Rickon nodded at that. "That's good to hear. Robb will be pleased." At that time, 5-year-old Vala became visible from behind her father. "Uncle Bran," she voiced happily, as she walked over to him together with her friends. She had become good friends with Lyra Castle and Lysa Poole, and the two younger girls followed her everywhere. He smiled at Rickon's daughter. "Hello there, Vala," he replied. She motioned to her father to pick her up, which he did without delay. Vala hugged him lightly when she was eye to eye with him. "Very well, uncle. I play a lot with my friends Lyra and Lysa. We made snow figures last week with father." He smiled fondly and winked at his younger brother. "Fatherhood suits you, Rickon. As long as you don't start about me marrying, I'll take that as a compliment. I don't know how much longer I can hear Robb and Mother talking about it without Uncle Brynden to back me up." He sighed. He understood. The Blackfish's refusal of marriages had been notorious, and because of this he had become Rickon's natural ally against Robb and Mother. To his knowledge, it had been the only deep-running disagreement that his brother and great-uncle had had throughout the years. He looked down and said hello to the two little girls that were awkwardly waiting on Vala next to Rickon. Lysa Poole was the oldest of Osric Karstark's two granddaughters, whilst Lyra Castle was Edric Castle's daughter. Edric had assumed leadership of House Castle with the aid of his mother Jonelle, after the death of Sir Roderick Castle. He had married Rhea Poole, a daughter of Osric Karstark and Jane Poole, after he had returned from Essos with Rickon. This made the two girls in front of him cousins and important minor nobles in Winterfell's court. Edric's older brother Martin had long since taken control of the lordship of Hayford, after matrilineally marrying the heiress. He had left his ancestral lands to his brother, whilst he turned himself into an important noble in Blackwater Bay. Some minor nobles from around Winterfell had joined him there, as well as a few hundred peasants that had followed him south. His sister Lyon Castle had accompanied him south and had married an important landed knight sworn to the Hayfords. "Where is the rest of the family?" he asked his little brother. "Jon and his sons are stuck in Dragon's Lair because of winter, they couldn't make the trip home in time. His daughters Lyon and Wenda are also stuck with their families in Torrens Square and Flint's Finger." He understood that. He was lucky to have the King's Road, snowed under as it was. They didn't have roads like that even if Robb had improved their network significantly. Sansa's family is much the same. They can't make the trip here. Apparently small trouble has arisen in the Bolton lands and both Lord Domeric and their son Beltasar are needed to quell it, although he ensures Robb that he has everything handled. Her daughters are stuck with their husbands in Carhold and Hornwood. Robb's eldest girls also won't be making the trip either. Sara and her husband Sir Geoffrey Mallister have sent their condolences, as have the rest of House Mallister. Birena will remain with her Royce husband in Runestone. Both the husband Allard and his father Lord Ander have sent condolences as well. Edda won't be coming either. She originally wanted to, but the recent death of Lord Robert Glover prevents her or her family from coming to Winterfell. His brother finished. He nodded. Their family had become very large. It had become almost impossible to have everyone in Winterfell. In winter the idea alone seemed ridiculous. Robb had had 6 children, Arya and Jon 4 and he and Sansa 3 each. Only Rickon had kept it at a single daughter, although you never knew whether his younger brother would conceive another bastard child or not. He finished his meal talking with Rickon, Alyn and his nephews Rickard and Jon. Afterwards, he went looking for Robb. He found his brother in his solar looking over scrolls and maps concerning the Riverlands. "How are you, Robb?" he asked his elder brother. The head of their house looked up at him. His stare was dull, and he had large bags under his eyes. To his shock, he realized that his brother had recently been crying. Without saying a word to each other, he pulled out a chair and sat in front of him. He could immediately guess what had happened. His brother had been thinking about their great-uncle and had felt emotional. He had hated the feeling and had thrown himself on tackling the problems in the Riverlands to distract him instead. "What is going on in the Riverlands?" he asked him. Robb looked thankful that he didn't ask any questions. The small folk seemed to be surviving winter well enough. All stores were full and occasional food transports are still coming into Duskendale, Maidenpool and Riverport from Essos. "That is very good to hear. What is troubling your mind then?" he asked. "The strife between our cousins. We are monitoring the Tully situation but have received some confusing information lately. For the last 3 years Oscar has been meeting and allying himself with riverlords in the western and central Riverlands. Even though no sounds remotely suggesting rebellion are heard. As you know, he has married a daughter of House Vance of Wayfarer's Rest and has recently had a son. To make matters worse, he has called him Ed Muir, before his elder brother Hoster had a son. His Bracken cousins, as well as Houses Piper, Terrick, Keith, Lolliston, Krill and Shawnee have been visiting often. Mostly smaller lords, but not insignificant if you put them together. Your spies in Harrenhal reported this." Robb nodded. "Berthon managed to get multiple spies inside the keep and emerging town. 2 of them have since gone silent, suggesting that Oscar is looking for them and has found some of them. However, the others have kept reporting everything. You say that nothing is suggesting rebellion. Why are you so concerned with it now then?" he asked. "Because I received word last week of a visit of Elmar Tully and the heir to House Piper to Harrenhal. The youngest Tully and the entire Piper retinue left in anger the next day. We don't know what was talked about, but it seems that both brothers fought amongst each other," Robb explained. "That's peculiar. Have we any other spies reporting to us? We tried to insert spies in Stonehenge, Pink Maiden and Wayfarer's Rest, but all attempts failed or were discovered within the first 2 to 3 weeks. The risk of angering these lords with further attempts is too great, so we have stopped trying for now. A rebellion needs someone to rally around, and Oscar Tully is the clear leader of a possible future rebellion. As long as we keep getting information from Harrenhal, we won't have to be surprised." "Good," he replied. "How is the rest of the North faring during the winter?" "We are doing very well, considering the short summer. The only danger areas for now are in the northwest. Jon's lands and the mountain clans, as well as the Glovers and Mormonts. However, I had additional supplies sent to Sea Dragon Point, the Wolfswood clans and the mountain ones just before the beginning of winter. For now, it seems enough. Jon and Edda are monitoring the area for me, but for now everything seems in order," Robb answered. "That is very good news. Is there any possibility of extra supplies going overseas?" "For the Mormonts and the clans that is a definite no. Large swaths of the Bay of Ice have frozen over. No ship will be able to sail through it. The voyage to Deepwood Motte is almost equally as dangerous. Dragon's Lair is different, as it is situated on the west side of Sea Dragon Point. This is towards the open sea. The waves are dangerous and cold, but not impossible to sail. The only ones willing to do so on a regular basis are the Ironborn and they are occasionally visiting Jon with shipments of grain from the Westerlands. It helps him and the more southern Shields and Riswells, but neither the Mormonts, mountain clans or Glovers will be helped because of it." He nodded in understanding. Normally, things could then be transported overland. However, the roads had all but disappeared under multiple feet of snow and carts regularly got stuck under it. Sending regular supplies in this manner was out of the question. "How is Moat Cailin doing?" his brother asked him. "Very well. We have come a long way since you made me the master of its lands 15 years ago. I have recently made a total assessment of the area. Due to immigration from the rest of the north and the higher natality rates, the population has risen from the original native 25,000 to almost 45,000. 500 of these migrants have been old gods-believing Riverlanders, who have moved into Alin's lands. Are they integrating well?" Rob asked. Over a quarter of them have married a northern partner, and we see amongst those that recently came of age that the ratio is much higher. We expect that well over half of the future generation will be mixed marriages. They will be integrated in no time. Good to hear. I don't want any problems like those in the Riverlands arising in the north as well, Rob told him. He nodded understandingly. The village beneath the fortress has grown to over 400 people. Of the 15,000 immigrants, 3/4 have settled in the areas that we haven't set aside to be controlled by lower nobility. 30% of the population now lives in those areas directly controlled by me, whereas before it was less than 10%. Agricultural production has shot up, and I have managed to create a small, but loyal and effective, guard of almost 100 men. Rob nodded approvingly. You have done a great job, brother. This will also strengthen your own position significantly. What about the local noble families in the area? How are the 6 original ones and the 7 ones we raised doing? The 7 new ones are quickly intermarrying and are loyal and frequent visitors of my court. My influence on the old families is somewhat different. Before I arrived, 4 of them had been focused on the Mandaelis, with the remaining 2 had been under the influence of the Dustins. He started. 2 of those focused on the Mandaelis have turned completely towards my rule. They have married their daughters to the new families and are betrothing their sons as well. One of them has betrothed their 12-year-old heir to Alan's 9-year-old daughter. Rob looked pleased but didn't interrupt him. The other 2 Mandaeli families have pulled back even more upon the Mandaeli lands. They see the other families as intruders and me as a danger to their autonomy. They pay their taxes, but apart from that they try to have as little contact with me as possible. They have even reduced their dealings with the 2 families that have integrated well. Rob frowned. It has only been 15 years. Some aversion was to be expected. They will soon realize their mistake, especially after their relative power shrinks due to increased population rates and trade amongst the newer houses. How about the other 2? The remaining 2 are situated in the northwestern area, geographically more distant from the other families. They have integrated somewhat, both families having made marriage alliances with the newer families. Alan married one's daughter, while the other's younger brother married a new master's sister. Yet, they remain largely focused on their neighbors in the Barrowlands. Both heirs have recently been betrothed to daughters of smaller Dustin vassals. He finished. Those will come along, although it will take a while longer. You have done a fine job, Bran. How is the fortress? All works have effectively been suspended these past years because of the winter. The 3 towers have been furnished and are being used permanently now. Stables, guardhouses, granaries, a hall, and other essential buildings are dotted around the area. The 10-year-old palisade wall has been strengthened further and plans are made to first construct stone towers where needed, before replacing the entirety of the structure with a stone wall when the funds arrive from Winterfell. Rob smiled at that. Impressive. I know that I haven't sent you the coin you were hoping for. This will change next summer. How is the keep? He shrugged. It is the same. It is still temporary, and I would love to construct a real one, but it will do for now. His keep consisted of the largest of the 3 stone towers, with multiple wooden buildings connected around it. In time, the tower would once again be part of the outer wall, and a new bigger keep would have to be constructed in the designated area in the middle. The outer wall first, the keep will follow. When spring arrives, we will focus on the towers and a stone outer wall. The keep will have to be for later. However, if you have any requests to temporarily better the keep until then, let me know. I will look into them. His brother replied. Thank you, Rob. He responded. His brother seemed a lot better now, so he decided to stay with him. Together they went over the politics of the North and who was marrying who and what implications this would have. Any more important news? He asked him after a while. Actually, yes. News has come from the war. Rob responded. Are they having problems with the season? His elder brother shook his head. They are losing some men to frostbite, but Commander Lanny has ensured me that they are isolated incidents, and they are holding out well enough. However, it seems that our cousin, Robert Stone, was one of those frostbite victims. He has died a month ago and was given a standard funeral of the Night's Watch. Some of the Old Vale rebels attended, like Lynn Corbray, Nestor Royce and Raymond Grafton, but nothing much happened. He nodded and raised his glass. To our cousin Robert then. He hadn't asked for his fate and was only a victim of Aunt Lisa's scheming and adultery in the end. He was sent to the orphanages of the Watch at age 8 and served amongst the Black Brothers dutifully for 19 years, after taking his oaths at 15. Never has he tried to instigate trouble at the war. That, at least, deserves a toast. Rob agreed and together they drank deeply. Afterwards, they forgot about their cousin. The next day, Rob, his great-uncle, could finally be buried. His mother had wanted to do it much earlier, but he had refused. Bran had a right to attend the funeral and so they had waited 3 weeks for his arrival. The morbid benefit of this freezing weather was that they had been able to store the body in an abandoned and badly isolated storage building for that time. The body had frozen over, removing the problem of the decomposing smell you sadly had with a lot of noble funerals. In his last months, his Sir Brynden had thought out a funeral rite for the Wolfsguard. Other rituals and symbolism for the order had also been created. A grey book, based on the Targaryen Kingsguard's White Book, had been added and the Blackfish had dutifully added entries on all the present and past Kingsguard. The late Harmon Tyrrell had been given a finaleized passage, and all current members a partial one as well. He had read through them, and they had been done with dignity. All current Wolfsguard members had been happy about them as well. The new commander of the Wolfsguard would then finish their pages when their time came. While it would only be made official today, it was well known that his brother-in-law would take over the order. Tor had served as his uncle's second-in-command for over 20 years. The past years he had taken over the order's day-to-day tasks, while Sir Brynden Tully had focused on advising him and Ricardo attending the small council. He stood above the entrance of the new tomb that had been installed behind the old keep next to the servants' courtyard. The graves below had been dug out just before winter and had been expanded since then. The architectural design of the structure was based on the Stark family tomb, but it was much smaller. When you walked down the stairs, you came upon a small hallway with 2 rooms. The smaller room on the right was meant for the Lord Commanders, whilst the much bigger room on the left was meant for the normal members of the Kingsguard. Both rooms were designed so that they could be expanded upon if need be. In the larger room, one grave could already be found. Harmon Tyrrell had died 8 years ago. He had originally been buried somewhere else but after finishing the tomb his bones had been interred here. Harmond had been his old master-at-arms in Carhold, and he had been a member of a poor noble family sworn to House Carstuck. The family had already sent a raven to show their appreciation for the honors that Harmond had been given and they had mentioned their intention of visiting his new grave the next summer. He looked around him at the faces of the people that were present today. All were packed in heavy fur cloaks, while fleeting, misty clouds came out of their mouths when breathing out the ice-cold air. Many of his family were here. Arya had come together with her husband and 4 children. Bran had come as well, although his 2 girls and wife had remained at Moat Cailin. His son Brynden still resided in Blackwood Vale, a wise choice and helpful when placating the Riverlords. Both Sansa and Jon had been unable to attend due to the distances and the weather. Sansa might have come, but the trouble that had arisen in their lands forced both Domeric and Baltasar to act. In the meantime, Sansa needed to reign over the Dread Fort. He couldn't blame them in the slightest, as only half of his own children were present. His Ricard stood at his right side with his wife Alera, formerly of House Umber. His boy had grown into a man, and he was immensely proud of him. He already helped him with much of his reign, often holding court in his name or going out to visit their vassals on his own. He had also ensured the future of House Stark, having fathered 3 children. The twins Edwyle and Linnera were now 3 years old and showed great spirit, whilst his youngest daughter Arana had only been born last year. On his other side stood Alis, with his mother next to her. His mother had aged over 10 years this winter. She had taken the loss of her brother and now uncle hard, and daily she despaired about the quarrel between her nieces and nephews. She had sent them all dozens of letters, until it had reached the point that half of them didn't care to respond anymore. Next to Ricard stood his youngest son John. His youngest had been fostered in Sea Dragon's Point with his brother and his namesake for 2.5 years. He had come back some 6 months ago, as he had wanted to finish his education himself. His brother hadn't minded, and his fostering had proven very useful. His boy had been taught a lot and had formed lasting bonds with John's sons and the Mormont heir. Next to John stood his betrothed and future grandfather-in-law. Lord Roderick Dustin had risen highly in the last 25 years. He had started as a distant cousin to the late Lord William Dustin, now he was the Lord of the Barrowlands and his granddaughter would soon be married to a prince. Some murmurings had arisen over Lady Lysa Dustin's lineage, but he had put those to rest easily. Lord Roderick's own lineage was impeccable. His mother had been a member of House Stark, a granddaughter of Artos the Implacable. His other maternal ancestors had been a Flint and a Carstark, and his father's family had consisted of Dustin cousins and vassals sworn to Barrowton. Most grumblings were directed to his late wife's ancestry. This was nonsense. Lady Lysa had hailed from an old house sworn to House Dustin, House Grey Barrow. Most of her ancestors had been among the low nobility there. Roderick's son William had married Barbary Roswell, a second cousin of the new Lord Roger Roswell and namesake of the former Lady Dustin. Her younger sisters had married other Dustin vassals, strengthening his hold over the Barrowlands. Whilst Roderick served in the kingdom's small council in Winterfell, it was William that ruled over Barrow Hall. His rule was just and effective, having decisively dealt with a claim to the Dustin inheritance by House Twokes some years ago. 14-year-old Lady Lysa would marry his son next year here in Winterfell. To get used to the new surroundings, she had joined the court as one of Alis' ladies-in-waiting until her marriage in the family. That wasn't even the only link that Roderick had managed to procure to House Stark, as his 13-year-old niece Jonella Sewin stood to marry William's son Ellard. The Dustins had risen highly, taking their rightful position once more as one of the North's major bannermen. Rukan and his daughter Vala were also in attendance. They stood next to Edric Castle, his youngest brother trusted right hand, and his family. Also present was House Poole, his friend Os quietly talking to his son Veon. His other council members were there as well. Lords Harry on Carstark, Damewell Deddings, Willis Marndaly, Harleys Hornwood and Rupert Brune stood together with Hoster Blackwood and Berthon. He looked at the two newest members of his council, Sir Halman Peage and Sir Richard Wayne. Both had been recent additions from this winter. Sir Halman had taken Lord Damewell Dedding's place as one of the advisors of the Riverlands, whilst Lord Damewell replaced Lord Jason Mallister as Master of Laws. Sir Richard Wayne, a 40-year-old knight from the Riverlands, was the brother of Lord Wayne. He had been recommended by both Lord Hoster Tully and Lord Lucas Goodwood and had come as the replacement of Lord Lothar Mallory, who had unexpectedly died last year. Other members of his court and petty nobles from around Winterfell circled behind them. In places of honor stood the 9 remaining Wolfsguard. They were dressed in full grey attire, most with deeply sad expressions on their faces. Alis subtly put her hand on his back. He knew what it meant. She gave him strength, but also signaled for him to begin. He took a deep breath, before addressing all those people gathered in front of him. We are here to remember one of the greatest knights that ever graced the lands of West Eos. Sir Brynden Tully belongs in the presence of the finest men the Riverlands has ever produced and was undoubtedly one of the greatest men of our age. He commenced. His deeds were numerous. He squired for Lord Dare in his youth, eventually being knighted for the qualities he clearly showed from a young age. He justly gained fame and renown for his deeds in the War of the Ninepenny Kings, before serving his father and elder brother in Riverrun. He began to lord his early life, long before his own birth. Equally as known as his achievements in war were his feats of utter stubbornness. Something I imagine my late grandfather would gladly attest to if he were still here. The joke caused more than a few laughs, especially among his uncle's former sworn brothers. Even his mother seemed to smile, probably thinking of old memories. All of you know about my great-uncle and grandfather's famous disputes, which is how he came to receive his famous moniker. He called himself the Blackfish of the Tully family, yet no one exemplified their words better. Family, duty, honor, House Tully's motto goes. While Sir Bryndon could undoubtedly be categorized as a tiresome brother by my grandfather, he always served his family. No one was a better uncle, granduncle or great-granduncle than him. Whatever his disputes with my grandfather Hoster, he served his descendants loyally for decades, paying back anything he still owed him thousandfold. After my aunt's wedding to Lord Arryn, he joined the man's service. He further increased his fame during Robert's rebellion, before joining his niece Lysa in the Vale as Knight of the Gate. 15 years he served there loyally, until my grandfather called for his help with my uncle Edmure and my brother Bran. He immediately left his duty as Knight of the Gate, which he had performed excellently for all these years. Why? Because family comes before anything else, and House Tully needed him. At the beginning of the war, he unleashed terror on the Lannister armies with only a few hundred horsemen. Raiding their supply lines, attacking their garrisons and even smashing the mountain Sir Gregor Clegane's forces against the walls of